Nobody gets to destroy an innocent person in my city. That one sentence spoken by the most dangerous man in Chicago was the only thing standing between Sophia Bennett and the people who wanted her gone forever. She was just a waitress. She had heard nothing on purpose. But in this city, accidents could get you killed. If you love stories about courage, justice, and the truth behind powerful men, subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story has traveled. Sophia Bennett had learned a long time ago that the hours between midnight and 3 in the morning belonged to a different kind of world. Not the world of families sitting down to dinner. Not the world of office workers checking their phones at their desks. The hours she worked, the hours she had always worked, were the hours when the city exhaled all the things it didn't want anyone to see in daylight. The cigarette smoke that drifted out of back doors. The arguments that spilled onto sidewalks between people too tired to keep pretending. The loneliness that pressed itself against restaurant windows when the last customer of the night finally stood up and left. Sophia knew that world better than most. She had lived inside it for 3 years. Bellini's was not a glamorous restaurant. It was not the kind of place that made it into food magazines or showed up in travel guides for tourists. It was wedged between a dry cleaner and an insurance office on the north side of Chicago. The kind of street that was busy enough during the day to feel almost cheerful and then emptied out completely by 10 o'clock at night like someone had pulled a plug. The sign above the door had 2 burned-out letters that the owner, Mr. Bellini, who was actually named Gary Peterson and had never been to Italy in his life, had been meaning to replace for 6 months. But the food was honest. The coffee was strong, and they would hire someone like Sophia without asking too many questions about the gaps in her resume. That was all she needed. She had started there 3 years ago when Lucas was 5 and their mother had just stopped being a person their mother was supposed to be. That was the only way Sophia could think about it anymore, without the grief turning into something unmanageable. Her mother had not died. She had just gradually disappeared into a series of decisions that made her less and less present, until one morning Sophia had woken up and realized that she was the adult in the apartment now, regardless of what her birth certificate said about her being 23 years old at the time. Lucas was 8 now. He was in the 2nd grade at Roosevelt Elementary, 3 blocks from their apartment. He was small for his age and he wore glasses that were slightly too big for his face, and he had a habit of talking about dinosaurs at length to anyone who would listen, which Sophia always found both exhausting and quietly wonderful. He trusted her completely. He thought she was the smartest person in the world. She had never told him how often she lay awake at night running numbers in her head, and still coming up short no matter how she arranged them. The electricity bill was 47 days overdue. The rent was going to be late again, and their landlord, Mr. Casimir, had stopped being patient about it sometime around the middle of last winter. He was not a cruel man exactly, but he was a man who had his own bills, his own pressures, his own anxious arithmetic, and he had made it clear in very plain language 2 weeks ago that the next conversation they had about late rent would be their last conversation as landlord and tenant. Sophia had nodded. She had thanked him for his patience. She had gone home, put Lucas to bed, sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she had made from a bag she had already used twice, and done the math again. It still did not work. But she had gotten up the next morning and gone back to Bellini's, because what else was there to do? That Thursday night, she had been on her feet since 11 in the morning. She had picked up a lunch shift because Marco, one of the other servers, had called in sick. She had stayed for the dinner rush, which was not much of a rush, but enough to keep her moving. By 11 at night, she was running on the particular kind of fuel that has no name, but that every person who has ever worked a double shift understands, the fuel that is not exactly energy, not exactly adrenaline. Something more like the body's refusal to admit how exhausted it already is. She was wiping down the last of the regular tables when Gary came out of the back office with his jacket on. "I'm heading out," he said. "Table 12 is still in the private room. Business dinner, they said. Should be done by midnight. Lock up when they leave, okay?" "Of course," Sophia said. "Tips are yours tonight. Slow week." "Thank you, Gary." He looked at her for a moment with the expression people sometimes got when they noticed she never complained. "You doing okay, Sophia?" "I'm fine," she said. "Go home." He went home. Table 12 was in what Gary called the private room, which was actually just the far back section of the restaurant separated from the main floor by a half wall and a velvet curtain that had seen better decades. It had its own entrance from a side hallway, which the more particular kind of business clientele sometimes preferred. Gary rented it out by the evening for a premium and did not ask detailed questions about what kind of business was being discussed inside. Sophia had cleared the main floor and was starting to roll silverware when she realized she had not brought fresh water to table 12 in almost 40 minutes. She filled a pitcher. She pushed through the curtain. There were 2 men at the table. They had been there since 8 o'clock. 2 untouched bread baskets between them. A bottle of wine that was mostly gone. The remains of meals they had eaten in a focused, almost impatient way, like men who needed food as fuel rather than pleasure. They were in their 40s, both of them, and they were wearing the kind of suits that did not need to announce their price because the cut and the fabric did that quietly on their own. They were talking, not loudly, not in a way that would carry, but the private room was small, and the side hallway created a particular kind of acoustic trick that Sophia had noticed before. Sound that was meant to be contained in that corner bounced off the half wall in a way that made it surprisingly clear to someone standing close by. She was not trying to listen. She was moving quietly because it was late, and she did not want to interrupt, and she had been trained by years of serving people who found interruption annoying. The words reached her before she could stop them from doing so. Confirmation came from Hargrove's own people. He doesn't know yet. And the transfer account's been frozen since Tuesday. He's going to figure it out when he tries to access it Friday morning, and by then it won't matter. A pause. What about the other situation, the DeLuca problem? Sophia's hand tightened on the water pitcher. Not because of the name DeLuca, which she did not recognize, because of what came next. That's contained. Moretti doesn't know about the Hargrove connection yet. By the time he figures it out, Moretti, the second man, said it flatly, like a word that required its own silence on either side. He's going to figure it out eventually. Eventually is not tonight. If he finds out before Friday, then we deal with it the way we deal with everything. The first man's voice was calm in a way that was worse than anger. No loose ends. Sophia had stopped moving without realizing it. She was standing 4 feet from the curtain with a water pitcher in her hand, and the specific understanding that she had just heard something she was not supposed to hear. Her mind ran through the name Moretti, the way you run your tongue over a sore tooth involuntarily, in spite of yourself. Adrian Moretti. She had not been in Chicago long enough to know his face, but she had been in Chicago long enough to know his name. Everyone knew his name. It appeared in the business pages of the Tribune, occasionally always in connection with real estate developments and investment funds, and the kind of civic charitable donations that got your photo taken shaking hands with the mayor. But it also appeared in the kinds of conversations people had in lowered voices in break rooms and on bus rides home. The name that meant something different, depending on who was saying it and why. The name that employees at certain businesses were instructed never to mention to customers. She needed to leave. She needed to put the water pitcher down very quietly and walk back through the curtain and finish rolling silverware and wait for these 2 men to ask for their check and then go home. She had almost managed it. Her foot caught the edge of a chair as she stepped back. Not loudly, just enough. The conversation stopped. Who's there? Her heart became a completely different organ in that moment. Something enormous. Something that took up space she needed for breathing. She stepped through the curtain. Both men were looking at her. Sorry, she said. Her voice was even. She had spent 3 years managing her voice in situations where she was anything but calm. I was just coming to check on water. Your glasses look full. I'll give you some privacy. She turned around. Waitress? The word stopped her, the way a hand on the shoulder stops you physically completely. She turned back. The man who had spoken was the one on the left. His face was not remarkable. That was the thing she would remember later. He looked like someone you would forget immediately if you passed him on the street. But his eyes were doing something that faces with forgettable features Sometimes do. They were working very hard. "How long have you been standing out there?" "I just came from the main floor," she said. "I was checking on water. I'm sorry for the interruption. I'll get your check ready." The man looked at his companion. Something passed between them. "Get our check," he said, "and don't keep us waiting." "Of course," she said. She walked back to the main floor. She printed their check. Her hands were not shaking. She had trained them out of shaking years ago, when she had learned that visible fear made difficult situations worse. She brought the check back. One of them paid in cash a significant amount, much more than the bill, with no request for change. She understood the message. She thanked them. She waited by the host stand while they retrieved their coats from the hooks near the side entrance. The second man, the one who had not spoken to her directly, paused at the curtain on his way out and looked at her one more time, not threatening, just evaluating. She held his gaze with the practiced blankness of someone who has spent years making herself as unmemorable as possible to customers who needed to feel invisible. He left. She stood there for another 30 seconds. Then, she locked the front door and finished the closing routine on autopilot, wiping surfaces, counting the till, turning off lights in the correct order, and left through the back door because it was on her route home. She told herself she had misunderstood. She told herself she had heard pieces of a conversation out of context, and her imagination had done the rest. She told herself this on the walk home, and she almost believed it by the time she turned onto her street. And then she noticed the car. It was parked across from her building. Dark. Engine running. The kind of dark that was deliberate rather than accidental, which is a thing you can tell if you have spent enough time paying attention to parking lots and street corners, which Sophia had. She kept walking. She did not look directly at it. She went into the building through the side door instead of the front. She climbed the stairs instead of taking the elevator. She went into her apartment. She checked on Lucas, who was asleep with his arm around a stuffed triceratops whose name was Gerald. She sat on the edge of her bed with her coat still on. She told herself she was being paranoid. She was awake until 4 in the morning. She did not call the police. She had thought about it lying there in the dark. She had run through the conversation in her head until it was frayed at the edges. She had thought about what she would say. "I heard 2 men in a restaurant talking about someone named Moretti, and something about a transfer and an account and no loose ends, and one of them looked at me before he left." She had thought about how that would sound. She had thought about what the officer on the other end of the phone would say, and she had thought about what happened next if the men she had seen had enough reach to know she had called, and she had thought about Lucas sleeping in the next room with Gerald. She had not called. She went to work the next morning because the alternative was not going to work, and the alternative to that was a conversation with Mr. Casimir that she was not ready to have. She got through the lunch shift. She got through the afternoon. Gary mentioned at around 4 o'clock that the 2 gentlemen from table 12 the previous night had called to say the service had been excellent and they would be back. He said it like it was a compliment. She said thank you. She was carrying a tray of coffee cups to the back station when she heard the door open and felt the change in atmosphere that a room gets when someone walks into it who alters the pressure of the air somehow. She did not turn around immediately. She finished setting down the tray. She picked up her order pad. She turned. There was a man at the door. He was alone. He was in his late 30s perhaps, and he was the kind of person whose presence in a room rearranges everything else in it around him without his having to do anything deliberate about it. He was wearing a dark overcoat over a suit that was significantly better than what most of Bellini's clientele wore. He was looking at the menu posted by the door as though he were genuinely reading it, which she somehow doubted. She went to seat him. Table for 1. He looked at her. His eyes were very dark and very direct, and she had the strange sensation of being seen more completely than she usually allowed. "Please," he said. She led him to a table near the window. She brought water. She gave him a few minutes and came back. "Coffee," he said. "And whatever your best thing is." "The ribollita," she said, because it was actually good. Italian bean stew. Chef makes it fresh daily. That, he said. She went to put the order in. She did not know who he was yet. She found out 40 minutes later when he was finishing his coffee, and she had brought the check, and Gary came out of the back office, moving with the particular combination of speed and careful dignity that meant something significant was happening. "Mr. Moretti," Gary said, arriving at the table, slightly breathless. "I didn't know you were coming in. I don't announce myself," the man said pleasantly. "The food was good. Your server was professional. I'll come back." He left a tip that was in Sophia's experience about 4 times what the bill warranted. She stood at the service station after he left and looked at the money and thought about the conversation she had overheard, and thought about the car across the street, and thought about Lucas and Gerald and the electricity bill. She thought about what it meant that the man everyone in this city was apparently afraid of had apparently come in for lunch. She went home that evening through a different route than usual. Her apartment door was open. Not broken open. Not forced. Just open. Pulled closed, but not latched the way you might leave a door if you had gone in and out in a hurry and the latch did not catch. She stood in the hallway for a long moment. She pushed it open with the tips of her fingers. Nothing was obviously wrong. Nothing was obviously missing. Lucas's dinosaur books were still on his shelf. The small amount of cash she kept in the coffee can in the back of the cabinet was still there. But things had been moved. Subtle things. Drawers not quite closed to where she had left them. Cushions at slightly different angles. The papers she kept in a folder on the kitchen counter bills. Lucas's school forms her work schedule shifted into a different order than she had arranged them in. Someone had gone through her apartment. Someone who wanted her to know they had done it. Not to steal, not to vandalize, to tell her something. She checked every room. She checked the locks. She checked Lucas's window. She sat down at the kitchen table. She thought about what it would take to pick up Lucas from school tomorrow and get on a bus to where. Her cousin in Milwaukee, who had 3 kids of her own in a 2-bedroom apartment. Her friend Denise, who was in no position to take anyone in. Nowhere. She had nowhere to go that these people could not find her just as easily as they had found her apartment. She was not going to run. She was 26 years old. She had a brother to take care of. She had $17 in her checking account until her next paycheck. She was not going to run. But she was scared in a very specific, very clear-eyed way that was different from the abstract fear she had carried around for years. The fear of not making rent. The fear of Lucas getting sick. The fear of things falling apart. This was the kind of fear that had a shape. That had a face, 2 of them, one forgettable and one evaluating. She made Lucas's dinner. She helped him with his homework, which was about fractions, and which made him dramatically aggrieved. She read him 2 chapters of his dinosaur book. She kissed his forehead when he fell asleep. She went to the kitchen. She made the used teabag tea. She thought. She had 2 choices. She could do nothing and hope that the people who wanted her frightened and silent were satisfied with having frightened her. That their message had been received and they would leave her alone. She looked at that option very carefully. She did not believe it. People who went through an innocent woman's apartment to leave a message were not people who stopped at the message. Her second choice was less clear. She did not have connections. She did not have money. She could not call the police for the reasons she had already worked through at 4 in the morning. But she had a name. She thought about the man who had come into Bellini's for lunch. The man everyone was afraid of. The man who had apparently been discussed in the conversation she should not have heard as someone who did not yet know something that certain other people were very invested in him not knowing. She thought about the fact that someone had just sent her a message by going through her home. She did not know yet what she was going to do with any of this, but for the first time since the previous night, she felt something shift inside her, away from the paralysis of pure fear and toward something harder and more angular. She was not going to disappear quietly, whatever that meant, whatever it cost her. She was not going to disappear. The thing about Adrian Moretti that most people did not understand, Or rather, the thing that the people closest to him understood, and everyone else only grasped in pieces, was that he had not started out ruthless. He had started out as someone who had watched ruthlessness operate on the people around him and had made a decision. He had grown up on the south side of Chicago in the years when that meant something specific about what you were going to see and what was going to be asked of you, and he had watched his father work himself into a broken back for a company that let him go without a pension 3 months before he would have been eligible for one. He had watched his mother take in alterations and ironing from the neighbors at $2 a garment to make up the difference. He had watched his younger sister get a scholarship to a good school and then lose it because there had been a form that no one had told them needed to be filled out by a certain date, and the person who could have told them had not bothered because people like them were not the people you bothered for. He had been 16 when he understood that the world ran on leverage, 18 when he decided to acquire some, 22 when he made his first real money in ways that were technically legal and close enough to the line that he could see the line clearly from where he was standing, 30 when he had enough of the right kinds of relationships in enough of the right kinds of places that the word empire started to be used in conversations about him, usually by people who were trying to figure out how to use it against him. The rules he had made for himself were not complicated. You did not hurt people who could not fight back. You did not use people who had no idea they were being used. You did not break things that someone poor had spent a long time building. And if you found out that someone in your city was doing those things, if you found out that someone was using an innocent person as a tool, as a message, as a piece of collateral in a game that person had never agreed to play, you did not look away from it. He had looked away once. He was 19, and the situation had seemed complicated, and by the time it was over, someone who should not have been hurt had been hurt very badly, and the complication that had made him look away had turned out not to be a complication at all. Just a reason he had chosen because it was easier than choosing to see clearly. He had not looked away since. His advisor was a man named Vincent Caruso, who had been with him for 12 years and who understood him better than most people Adrian had ever met, which was a fact Adrian appreciated and occasionally resented. Vincent came into his office the morning after the Bellini's lunch with a file folder, and the expression of a man who had several things to say and was deciding which order to say them in. Adrian was standing at the window looking at the city. He did this most mornings. It was not a sentimental habit. It was a way of reminding himself what he was actually responsible for. "Tell me," Adrian said. "The men at Bellini's last night were Carver and Rice," Vincent said. "Carver works directly for DeLuca. Rice is a financial operator who moves money through structures that don't technically exist. They met for 2 hours. We don't know what was discussed, but whatever it was, DeLuca is interested enough in it to send Carver personally. What does DeLuca want with a restaurant on the north side? He doesn't. Neutral ground. The restaurant has no connection to any of our operations." Adrian turned. "And the waitress?" Vincent paused. "What waitress?" "There was a woman on staff last night. I saw her when I was there. She came in around 4. She was careful." Vincent did not say anything. "I want to know about her," Adrian said. "You went to Bellini's to check on the meeting," Vincent said carefully. "I went to Bellini's because someone mentioned it as the location, and I like to see things myself rather than read about them secondhand. The food was also good." Adrian picked up his coffee. "The waitress. Find out who she is." Vincent found out by the next morning. He put the file on Adrian's desk without comment. Sophia Bennett, 26. No criminal record, no affiliations, no significant assets, worked at Bellini's for 3 years full-time, plus regular overtime. Sole caretaker of a minor sibling, 8-year-old Lucas Bennett. Current address on the North Side lease in her name. No protection. No connections. Nothing that would make her a target. Except that she had been in the right place at the wrong time, and Carver was not a man who left uncertain witnesses to their own decisions. Adrian read the file twice. He picked up the photograph that was standard in these files, an employee photo from some form or other, the kind of photograph that is purely functional, designed to establish identity rather than capture a person. A young woman who looked tired in a particular way that was not about the hour of the photo, but about the accumulation of hours that had brought her to it. Dark hair, serious eyes. Someone who had learned not to expect anything from a photograph being taken. He set the file down. Vincent. Yes. The apartment. Vincent set his jaw. Carver's people, last night. They were checking to see what she had. Whether she'd written anything down, told anyone, made any kind of record. Did they find anything? No, because there was nothing to find. And Carver? He knows that. But he also knows that she was there and she was close enough to hear, and Carver does not leave variables. It's his methodology. The word hung there. Adrian was quiet for a moment. She has a brother, he said. 8 years old, Vincent said. 2nd grade. Adrian stood up. Where is she tonight? She's working the closing shift. She'll finish around midnight, then walk home. She takes the same road every night. North on Michigan, then west on... No, Adrian said. He was already moving toward the door. Not tonight, she won't. But Sophia had told herself that Thursday nights were the worst, and that nothing about the 2 nights since had been actually threatening, just suggestive. She had told herself this through the lunch shift, and through the dinner rush, and through the side-eyed glances she kept giving to every customer who came through the door, which was exhausting, and which she could not seem to stop doing. By 11 at night, she was tired enough that her alertness was starting to fray at the edges, which was exactly the kind of tired that made mistakes happen. She knew this. She tried to compensate for it. She was methodical about closing tables in order station by station, every step the same way she had done it 100 times. Gary had left at 10:30. She was alone. She counted the till. She turned off the kitchen lights. She got her coat from the back. She hesitated at the back door. She thought about the car that had been parked across from her building. She thought about her door that had not been quite closed. She took a breath. She pushed the back door open and walked out into the alley. The alley ran alongside the building and then opened out onto the side street, where she usually turned north to connect with her regular route home. It was a route she had walked so many times that she did it without thinking, and tonight she was trying to think about it, to be conscious of each section, to notice if anything was different. The side street was empty. She turned north. She heard the footsteps when she was halfway up the block. Not loud, measured, the kind of footsteps that maintained a deliberate distance that was close enough to be intentional. She kept walking. She kept her pace even. She turned onto the parking structure on the next block because it was lit and it had cameras, and she thought for a fraction of a second that this was smarter than the empty street. It was not smarter. The parking structure at that hour was not lit. The cameras she could see as soon as she was inside had been disabled recently, from the angle of one that was pointing directly at the ceiling. She heard a second set of footsteps from the other direction. She stopped in the middle of the second level. 2 men came toward her from opposite ends. She recognized neither of them, but she recognized the way they were moving. She had nothing. No phone signal, 3 bars dropped to 0 as she'd entered the structure. No one who knew where she was. No weapon, just herself, and her coat, and the particular clarity that happens sometimes when fear reaches a certain level and transforms into something still and very focused. She was trying to calculate exits when the black car came around the far ramp and stopped. The headlights stayed on. The door opened. She did not recognize him immediately in that light. She recognized the way the 2 men who had been moving toward her both stopped. And then Adrian Moretti stepped into the headlights, and she knew the face from lunch 2 days ago, and everything rearranged itself again. He did not look at the 2 men first. He looked at her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. Her voice was somewhere else for a moment. He turned then to the 2 men. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten them. He said 3 sentences to them in a very quiet, very level tone. And whatever those sentences were, she was too far away to hear them clearly. The 2 men exchanged a look, and then left. They just left. He looked back at her. "She is under my protection now," he said clearly enough for anyone remaining in the structure to hear. Not to her, to the space around them, to whatever reporting systems were in place. She stood there in the headlights of his car and thought about the 24 hours she had just lived through, and then she thought about this moment specifically. "I don't know you," she said. "No," he said. "But I know enough." "Enough for what?" He looked at her steadily. "Enough to know you didn't deserve to be put in the middle of something you had nothing to do with." She thought about that. "Those men," she said, "they were sent by—" "Yes. And you—" She stopped. She was not naive. She knew who Adrian Moretti was. She knew what the name meant. She knew that the man standing in front of her was not standing there out of simple altruism, that there were angles and interests and calculations behind any action a person like this took. She also knew that she was standing in a parking structure at midnight, having just almost been. She didn't let herself finish that thought, and that the alternative to his presence was a reality she did not want to look at directly. "What happens now?" she said. He looked at her with that same quality of directness she had noticed the first time. "That depends on what you want to happen." "What are my options?" "I can take you somewhere safe tonight. Somewhere they won't reach you." She waited. "And Lucas," she said. Something shifted in his expression, very slightly. "And Lucas," he said. "How do you know his name?" "I know more than that," he said. "I know about the electricity bill. I know about Casimir. I know that you have been holding everything together for 3 years on a schedule that would break most people." She felt something she had not expected to feel: anger. Not at the invasion of her privacy exactly. That was there too. But underneath it, something more precise. "You had me investigated," she said. "I had you looked at," he said, "when I realized what you might have walked into. And that's something you just do. When someone in my city might be in danger because of something connected to me, yes. I'm not connected to you," she said. "I was doing my job." "I know that," he said. "That's the whole problem." She stood there with her coat held close and her mind working through everything very quickly. She thought about the practical reality of her situation. She thought about Lucas. She thought about what it meant to walk home tonight, what tomorrow looked like from here. She thought about the way he had said, "She is under my protection now," not a question, not a negotiation, a statement of something decided. "I don't need a rich man saving me," she said. He did not argue with this. He waited. "You think money fixes everything," she said. "No," he said. "I know it doesn't." "Then why are you here?" He was quiet for a moment. A long moment for him based on what she was beginning to understand about how he moved through the world. "Because," he said, "nobody gets to destroy an innocent person in my city." She looked at him. He was not asking for anything. He was not explaining himself. He was not performing for her. He was just there, in a parking structure at midnight, having come apparently because someone had told him she was walking home alone, and things had been set in motion around her that she had not agreed to and could not have stopped. "You could have just sent people," she said. "You didn't have to come yourself." "No," he agreed. "I didn't have to." She looked at him for a long time. "My brother can't know any of this," she said finally. "He's 8. He's got dinosaurs and fractions homework and a normal life, and I am not going to be the reason that changes." "Agreed. And I'm not going anywhere indefinitely. This is temporary, whatever this is." "Agreed. And I—" She stopped. She looked at him very directly. "I am not your possession. Whatever this protection thing means, I am not something you own or control." He held her gaze. "You are not my possession," he said. A pause. "You are someone I chose to protect." She considered that. It was a distinction she had not expected him to make. She looked back at the exit of the parking structure, at the empty city outside, at everything that waited for her on the other side of whatever she decided in the next 30 seconds. She thought about Lucas and Gerald and Fraction's homework. She looked back at Adrian Moretti. "One night," she said. "Tonight. and then we figure out what actually happens next." He nodded. He opened the car door. She walked toward it, and in the cold air of a Chicago parking structure at midnight, Sophia Bennett made a decision that she could not yet know was going to change everything. Not just her situation, not just her circumstances, but the entire shape of who she was going to become. She got in the car. The city moved past the windows. Neither of them spoke for a long time. When she finally did, she said, "The ribollita really was good." He made a sound that she realized after a moment was very close to a laugh. "It was," he said. "I'll probably go back." She looked out the window at the lights of the city. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Me too." It was not everything. It was nowhere near everything. But it was somewhere to start. And for Sophia Bennett, who had learned a long time ago to build from whatever was in front of her, that was enough. The safe house was not what Sophia had expected. She had expected something clinical. Something that announced its own seriousness. Heavy curtains, men standing by doors, the specific atmosphere of a place that existed for the purpose of keeping people contained. She had expected to feel like a problem being managed. Instead, it was an apartment on the 14th floor of a building near Lincoln Park that looked from the inside like someone had actually lived there. Books on the shelves. A kitchen with a coffee maker that was not cheap. 2 bedrooms with real beds, not cots. A window that looked out over the city with the particular beauty that Chicago has at night when you are high enough up that the noise doesn't reach you and all you can see is the lights. Lucas had been asleep before they arrived. One of Adrian's people, a quiet woman named Elena, who had introduced herself without explaining her role, and who had the manner of someone who had arranged a great many things quickly and without visible stress, had gone to the apartment first, quietly, and gotten him without waking him, and by the time Sophia arrived, he was already in the second bedroom with Gerald tucked under his arm and the dinosaur book on the nightstand. Sophia stood in the doorway and looked at him for a long time. She thought about what he would say in the morning. She thought about the explanation she was going to have to construct. She thought about how much of the truth an 8-year-old could hold. She closed the door softly. Adrian was in the main room. He had taken off his coat. He was standing at the window with a glass of water, not looking at anything in particular in the way that people stand at windows when they are actually thinking about something very specific. "How long have you been doing this?" she asked. He turned. "Doing what?" "Moving people around the city, deciding things." She sat down on the couch because her feet had reached their limit. "Arranging things before anyone asks you to." He considered the question in the way she was starting to notice. He considered things not performing consideration, but actually taking a moment before answering. Long enough that it doesn't feel like arranging anymore. It feels like maintenance. "Maintenance," she said. "Keeping the parts working. Making sure the things that are supposed to function actually function. And I'm a part now." "No," he said. "You're not a part. You're a person who got caught in a machine she had no business being near, and the machine is mine to manage." She looked at him. "You're very precise about the distinction. Precision matters. Does it always work?" "The precision." He looked at her without answering. Which she was starting to understand was itself an answer. An honest one, which was more than she had expected. She leaned her head back against the couch. The ceiling was clean and white, and very far away. "I have to be at work at 11, she said. "You're not going to work tomorrow." She picked her head up. "Excuse me." "Bellini's isn't safe right now. Carver's people know the location. They know your shift schedule. Going back tomorrow would be—" "My job," she said. "It would be my job, which is what I have, and losing it isn't something I can absorb right now. I'll cover whatever you lose from—" "No." The word came out harder than she intended. She adjusted. "No. Thank you, but no. I don't take money from people I don't know." He looked at her steadily. "You're sleeping in an apartment I'm paying for. That's different. That's temporary, and it's circumstances." She sat up straighter. "Money is different. Money means something different." He was quiet for a moment. "Tell me what you need," he said finally. "Not what you'll accept from me. What you actually need." She thought about that. It was a strange question because she was not used to being asked it directly. "I need Lucas to go to school tomorrow like it's a normal day," she said. "I need the electricity to stay on. I need to not lose the job that pays the electricity." She paused. "And I need to understand what is actually happening, what those men were talking about, why someone went through my apartment, why any of this is why I'm in this." Adrian set down his glass. He sat down in the chair across from her, not close, not creating any pretense of a different kind of conversation. He sat the way he probably sat in business meetings, squarely without wasted movement, like a man who made decisions about distance deliberately. "What did you hear?" he said. Are you asking me officially?" "I'm asking you so I understand what Carver thinks you know." She went through it. The names, the conversation fragments, the frozen account, the timing, the reference to him to Moretti, and what came after it. No loose ends. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for long enough that she thought he might not say anything at all. "Hargrove," he said finally. "Yes. Thomas Hargrove. I don't know the first name, just Hargrove." He stood up. He went back to the window. He looked at the city for a moment. "Thomas Hargrove is a man who has been building a case," Adrian said, "against Marco DeLuca. He's been building it for 2 years quietly with people who did not know they were helping him build it. And DeLuca recently became aware of this. And you. And I didn't know the specific shape of it until approximately 1 hour ago, when you told me about a frozen account and a Friday morning and no loose ends." He turned to look at her. "You handed me something significant tonight, Sophia." She registered the use of her first name. He had not used it before. "I didn't hand you anything on purpose," she said. "I know that." He moved away from the window. "DeLuca and I have what you might call a managed disagreement. We operate in overlapping spaces. There are lines we've maintained for several years because crossing them would cost both of us more than the benefit would be worth. What you heard suggests he's planning to cross one of those lines in a way that uses Hargrove as a mechanism. Why does that matter to me? Because you heard it," he said, "and because Carver was there, and because Carver told DeLuca that there was a variable at Bellini's, and DeLuca's response to variables is—" He stopped. "No loose ends," she said. He looked at her. "Yes," he said. She absorbed that. She had known it in the abstract since the night before. But hearing it confirmed in someone else's voice, in his voice, which carried the weight of actual information rather than her own scared speculation, made it concrete in a different way. "So what happens now?" she said. "Now I have to move faster than I was planning to move." "And me." "And you stay out of sight until I do." "For how long?" He looked at her directly. "I don't know." She respected the honesty. She did not like the answer. "Lucas can't miss school," she said. There's a presentation he's been working on, about the Cretaceous period. He's been working on it for 3 weeks. He will be—" She stopped herself. "He can't just disappear. Elena can take him in the morning, through a route that's clean. He doesn't know Elena. He'll meet her. He doesn't do well with—" She stopped again. She was aware that she was negotiating the logistics of her 8-year-old brother's school day with a man who ran organized crime and real estate holdings in the same city, and that there was something surreal about this that she did not have the bandwidth to properly process at midnight. "He needs to know it's okay. He needs to hear it from me." "Then you tell him in the morning." She looked at him. "And tell him what exactly?" Adrian met her eyes. For the first time that night, she saw something in his expression that was not controlled. Just briefly, a flicker of something that was not calculation. "Tell him," he said slowly, "that someone is helping you sort something out. That you're not in trouble. That he's going to school and coming home, and everything is the same." "Is that true? That everything is the same?" He held her gaze. "It'll be true by the time he needs it to be." She did not know if she believed that. She was not sure she had a better alternative. She went to bed at 2 in the morning and slept against all expectation until 7. Lucas accepted Elena with the equanimity of a child who had grown up understanding that his sister sometimes had to solve problems that he did not get full information about. He ate his cereal. He asked Elena 2 questions about whether she knew anything about the Spinosaurus, which Elena handled admirably by saying she knew it was very large and asking him to explain the rest. He put on his backpack. He gave Sophia a hug that lasted slightly longer than his usual ones because he was 8 and he could tell that something was off even if he could not name it. "You're okay," he said into her shoulder. "I'm okay," she said. "Go do your presentation." "It's going to be the best one," he said. "Obviously." He went. She stood at the door after it closed and breathed for a moment. Then she turned around and found Adrian at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee and a phone he had just put face down, and she made a decision she had not planned to make. She sat down across from him. He pushed one of the cups toward her without comment. She wrapped her hands around it. The apartment had good heat, but she was cold in the specific way that has nothing to do with temperature. "Tell me about DeLuca," she said. He looked at her over his own cup. "Why?" "Because I'm in the middle of whatever this is, and you told me last night that precision matters, and I can't be precise about something I don't understand." He studied her for a moment. She had noticed that he did this ran some kind of internal assessment before deciding how much to give. She thought he was probably not often asked direct questions by people who had as little leverage as she did, and were not afraid of the lack of it. "Marco DeLuca is 54 years old," Adrian said. "He controls distribution networks through most of the South and West Sides. He's been operating for 20 years. He is methodical, patient. He builds slowly, and he holds what he builds carefully. And the disagreement between you, the disagreement is about geography and about methods." He set down his cup. "DeLuca uses people, not in the abstract sense, in the specific sense. He finds the people around his targets, and he uses them as pressure points. Children, parents, people who have nothing to do with the actual conflict." Sophia was quiet. "And Hargrove," she said. "Thomas Hargrove is a federal accountant. He spent 18 months looking at DeLuca's money flows under the cover of a routine municipal audit. He found things. He was building toward something. DeLuca found out." Adrian looked at her steadily. "The account that was frozen Tuesday, that's Hargrove's access. Whoever froze it had reach into federal systems. That's a level of operation I didn't know DeLuca had developed." "So DeLuca has people inside federal systems?" "That's what you told me." She held the coffee cup very still. "And what does that mean for Hargrove?" Adrian did not answer immediately. She looked at him. "Adrian," she said. The name came out without her deciding to use it. "What does it mean for Hargrove?" "It means he's being set up," he said. "The frozen account is the first step. By Friday morning, Hargrove is going to discover that the audit he's been building has been reversed, that the records he's been compiling are going to look like the records of someone who has been fabricating a case. Someone on DeLuca's payroll. That's not just destroying the investigation, that's destroying Hargrove," he said. "Personally, professionally, in every way that matters." She sat with that. "Can you stop it? I'm working on it. By Friday." By Friday. She looked at him. He was very certain, or he was performing certainty very well, and she was not yet sure which. But either way, she was starting to understand something about how this man moved through the world. He did not panic. He did not dramatize. He identified the shape of a problem and began addressing its edges with a steadiness that was either deeply reassuring or, in the wrong hands, deeply dangerous. She thought it might be both at once. "I have a question," she said. "Ask it. Why do you care about Hargrove? If he's building a case against DeLuca, and DeLuca is your competitor, wouldn't it benefit you to let DeLuca handle it? Get rid of the investigation, get rid of Hargrove, and then—" "No," he said. "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have for that question." He looked at her steadily. "I don't—" He stopped. She watched him choose words carefully. There are lines between what I do and what I'm willing to do. Letting an innocent man be destroyed because it's convenient for me is on the wrong side of one of those lines. She studied him. Most people in your position wouldn't have lines like that, she said. Most people in my position aren't me. She held his gaze for a moment. That sounded arrogant, she said. Yes, he said. It also sounded true. She looked down at her coffee. She could not disagree. She stayed in the apartment that day because the agreement she had made with herself, the one that said she was not naive, that she understood the real terrain of her situation, required her to be practical, and practical meant not walking back into a location that Carver's people knew. She called Gary and told him she had a family emergency. Gary was not happy. Gary said something about Friday being a complicated night and needing all hands. She apologized. She said she would be back as soon as she could. She could hear him deciding whether to push and then deciding not to. She spent the morning with the folder of bills she had asked Elena to bring from the apartment, along with a change of clothes for her and Lucas. She worked through each one methodically. She made calls. She made arrangements. She did the things that needed doing. Adrian was in and out. He made phone calls in other rooms, sometimes in Italian, sometimes in the flat. American English that was apparently his default. He had people coming and going. Men she did not learn the names of who came in and spoke quietly and left. She did not ask about the conversations. She was not going to pretend she was in a position to know everything, and she did not need to know everything. What she needed was for this to resolve before she ran out of shifts she could plausibly miss. At 2 in the afternoon, she was sitting at the kitchen table working through a calculation about the electricity, when she heard Adrian in the hallway say something sharp in Italian with the specific quality of voice that means a piece of information has arrived that changes things. She kept her eyes on her bills. She heard him end the call. He came into the kitchen. Carver made a move, he said. She set down her pen. What kind of move? He went to Bellini's this morning. He spoke to Gary. He presented himself as a city inspector. She felt the cold again. What did he tell Gary? He told Gary there had been a complaint related to an employee. He asked questions about your schedule, your address on file. Gary gave him what he had. He didn't know what he was giving it to. She pressed her hands flat on the table. My address on file is the apartment. Yes, which is empty. Which is why this is manageable, Adrian said. But it tells us something. That Carver isn't waiting. That DeLuca isn't waiting. Carver doesn't move without instruction. He looked at her. DeLuca is accelerating the timeline, which means something changed since Tuesday. What changed? He held her gaze. I made some calls this morning. She looked at him. You made calls, she said slowly. And DeLuca found out you were making calls. Apparently. And now he knows that you're connected to this. He knew that when Carver came for you in the parking structure, Adrian said. What changed is that he now knows I'm actively moving against his Friday operation. She absorbed that. So I'm not just a loose end anymore, she said. I'm leverage. He did not look away. Potentially, he said. She felt something happen inside her. Not panic, because panic was something she had trained herself out of by necessity, but a kind of bright, cold focusing. Like when you have been trying to see something in dim light, and then someone turns on a lamp, and the thing becomes very clear, and you understand that you had been looking at it wrong the whole time. He's going to use me, she said, to get to you. He's going to try. And you're what? You're going to protect me so well that he can't. Yes. And at the same time, you're trying to stop whatever happens to Hargrove on Friday. Yes. And you have... She checked her sense of the time. 36 hours. Approximately. She picked up her pen again. Then you should probably stop explaining things to me and go do them, she said. He looked at her for a moment. With that expression, she was beginning to catalog the one that was not quite surprise, but was adjacent to it. like someone who had been expecting a different kind of response. "You're not going to tell me you're scared," he said. "I am scared," she said. "I'm also not going to sit here and tell you about it while you have a 36-hour deadline." She went back to her calculation. "Go." He went. She finished the electricity calculation. She made the call. She paid the bill. Lucas came home at 4 with a drawing he had made during free period. A Spinosaurus that was objectively extremely well rendered for a second grader, and the news that his presentation had gone very well, and that his teacher had said the part about the fish was particularly interesting, and that one of the boys in his class had asked a follow-up question that Lucas found impressive. She listened to all of it. She ate dinner with him at the kitchen table, while Adrian's people moved in and out of the apartment with the specific discretion of people who understood they were in proximity to a child and adjusted accordingly. Lucas looked at the door once when two of them left, and then looked back at Sophia. "Is the man who owns this place nice?" he said. "What makes you ask?" "Elena said someone was helping us, and there's a lot of people here." He ate a forkful of pasta. "Are they the helping people?" "Sort of," she said. "Gerald likes it here," Lucas said. "The bed is softer." She looked at her brother. She thought about 3 years of used tea bags and late rent notices and the particular arithmetic of not having enough. She thought about how none of it was his fault and how carefully she had tried to make sure he never felt the weight of it. "Yeah," she said. He ate more pasta. "The window is better too. You can see the whole city." She looked at him. "We're not staying," she said. "This is just for right now." He nodded, untroubled. "I know," he said. "But it's nice while it's now." She looked back at her plate. She did not say anything. He was 8 years old, and he was wiser than she gave him credit for. So, she found Adrian in the second bedroom he had been using as a working space at 9 that night. The door was open. He was on the phone. He held up one finger one moment, and she waited in the doorway, and she heard enough of the phone call to understand that something had moved in the right direction. He ended the call. "Hargrove's account was unfrozen at 6 p.m., he said. "A technical error according to the official filing, which means someone in the right place made the right call." He looked at her. "The Friday operation is disrupted. Not destroyed, DeLuca will rebuild, but not by Friday. Hargrove is safe. Hargrove is safe." She let out a breath she had not been conscious of holding. "And Carver," she said. "Carver is a problem that doesn't go away because one operation gets disrupted." He set down his phone. "But Carver without a directive is a significantly more manageable problem. How long until DeLuca gives him a new directive? That depends on how uncomfortable we can make the next several weeks for DeLuca's operations." He looked at her steadily. "Which is not your concern." "It's a little bit my concern," she said. "Since I seem to be caught in the middle of it." "I'm working on the middle," he said. She leaned against the doorframe. She was tired, a different kind of tired than the restaurant tired, heavier and more complicated. "Do you do this often?" she said. "The intervening." He considered the question. "Define often." "People who get caught in things they shouldn't be caught in. Do you intervene often?" "When I find out about it," he said, "which isn't always." "And when you do find out, then yes." "Why?" He looked at her steadily. The working space behind him had papers on the surfaces, and a laptop, and 2 phones, and the general geography of a man who ran operations from wherever he happened to be standing efficiently and without ceremony. "When I was 22, he said, there was a woman in my building. She had 2 kids. She had gotten herself into something not on purpose the same way you didn't do this on purpose, and the people she had gotten connected to made it very clear that she was not allowed to leave. And I knew about it. I knew the specifics. I knew what was happening inside that apartment." He stopped. "And," she said. "And I told myself it wasn't my business," he said, "that it was complicated, that getting involved would cost me things I wasn't ready to lose." He held her gaze. "By the time I was ready, it was over. In the worst way." Sophia said nothing. I decided, he said, that I would not be that person again. The one who knew and looked away because the cost of knowing was inconvenient. She looked at him for a long time. This was not what she had expected. Not the admission, the specific and unglamorous honesty of it. Men who had what Adrian Moretti had did not usually explain themselves this way. They did not usually hand you the thing that made them who they were without being asked directly for it. I'm sorry, she said quietly. About the woman. So am I, he said. Every time I think about it. Silence. You can't fix it by protecting everyone else, she said. No, he said. But it's better than the alternative. She pushed off the doorframe. I told Lucas we're not staying, she said. He took it very well. He said the window was nice while it's now. Something crossed Adrian's face. He sounds like a good kid. He's the best person I know, she said simply. She went back to the main room. She sat by the window that Lucas had liked and looked at the city and thought about 36 hours that had been compressed into something she did not yet have the right words for. She thought about a man who had driven himself to a parking structure at midnight because looking away was something he had decided once and permanently not to do. She thought about the fact that he had not asked her to be grateful. He had not asked her for anything. She thought about her sister's habit of warning her against men with money and power, the specific category of man who offered things in order to own the person he had offered them to. She had carried that warning carefully for years. She had applied it to every interaction with every person who came from more than she did. She was still applying it. But she was also finding in the particular honesty of 11 at night, when she was too tired to construct defenses she did not need, that Adrian Moretti did not map cleanly onto the category she had built for him. That was not comfort. That was something more complicated than comfort. She looked at the city. She thought about Gary and the lunch shifts, and the electricity bill that was now paid, and Lucas's Spinosaurus presentation, and the way her brother had said, "It's nice while it's now," with the pure and devastating practicality of a child who had learned to live inside the present, because the future was her job to worry about. She thought about what it would mean to trust this man, not fully, not blindly, but in the functional way that circumstances required. She thought about what it would cost her. She was still thinking when she heard footsteps behind her. Adrian sat down in the chair across from the window. He did not say anything. They both looked at the city. After a while, she said, "The people who searched my apartment, were they looking for something specific or just looking?" "Looking," he said. "Creating fear is its own objective sometimes." "It worked," she said. "You're still here," he said. "Still thinking. Still asking questions." "Scared and functional aren't mutually exclusive," she said. "No," he agreed. "They're not." Another silence. "You should get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow is going to be complicated." "In what way?" "In the way of, I need to move you and Lucas again. The address here is still clean, but DeLuca's people will work outward from the Bellini's information, and I'd rather be ahead of that than respond to it." "Okay," she said. He looked at her. "Just okay." "You've been right about everything so far," she said. "And I'm tired." "And yes." "Okay." She stood up. "Adrian," she said. He looked up at her. "The woman," she said. "The one in your building." He waited. "What was her name?" He was quiet for a moment. "Maria," he said. She nodded. "Maria," she said quietly. "Okay." She went to her room. She listened through the wall for Lucas's breathing, which was even and deep, the breathing of a child who had no idea what his sister had been carrying through the last 48 hours, and who had simply gone to sleep because he trusted that she had it handled. She closed her eyes. She thought about the way Adrian had said, "She is under my protection now," in a parking structure to no one in particular, as if stating a principle rather than making a deal. She thought about how strange it was to feel safe in a place she had never been before, with a man she still did not fully understand in the middle of something that was nowhere near over. She thought about Maria. She fell asleep with the lights of the city coming through the curtains, and Gerald sitting on Lucas's nightstand, keeping watch in the way that stuffed triceratops do diligently and without expectation. Outside Chicago moved through the night in all its complicated, unrelenting life. And in an apartment on the 14th floor, two people who had no reason to trust each other had arrived without ceremony or announcement at the beginning of something neither of them had words for yet. The second location was a townhouse on the north edge of the city that belonged, according to Elena's brief explanation, to someone who owed Adrian a favor and was currently in Florida. It had 3 bedrooms and a yard that Lucas discovered within approximately 90 seconds of arriving, and immediately claimed as a personal research zone on the grounds that there might be interesting insects. Sophia let him go. She stood in the kitchen with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup she had made herself because it felt important to do something ordinary, and she listened to Lucas narrating his findings to no one in particular through the back window. And she thought about the fact that it was Friday morning, and somewhere across the city, Thomas Hargrove had gone to access an account and found it available and had probably not understood why, and probably never would. Adrian had been on the phone since 6 in the morning. He was on the phone now in the other room, speaking in the low, controlled voice that meant the conversation was serious without being urgent. She had learned in the past 48 hours to read the difference between his urgent voice and his serious voice. They were not the same thing. The urgent voice was faster, slightly flatter. The serious voice was even slower than his normal speech, as though he were laying each word down carefully and making sure it stayed where he put it. He came into the kitchen at 8:15. "DeLuca knows the Friday operation is disrupted," he said. "How does he know?" "Because Hargrove accessed his account this morning, and the audit records are intact, and whoever DeLuca had inside the federal system is now being looked at very carefully by people I put in contact with the right oversight office." He poured himself coffee. DeLuca is not someone who takes disruption quietly. What does he do when he doesn't take things quietly? Adrian set down the coffee pot. He turned and looked at her with the specific directness that she had come to understand meant he was going to tell her something she was not going to like. "He reorganizes his pressure," he said. "He finds the part of the situation that he can still control, and he applies everything to that." She set down her cup. "I'm the part he can still control," she said. "You're the part he thinks he can still reach." "Is there a difference?" "The difference is whether he's right." Adrian looked at her steadily. "And he's not right. But he doesn't know that yet." "How long before he finds out we moved?" "He already knows we moved. He doesn't know where to yet." She absorbed that. "How long until he figures out where to?" "Longer than he'd like. This location is—" He paused. "It's not connected to any name he has access to. The chain is long and indirect." "But not infinite." "Nothing is infinite," he said. "That's why we keep moving faster than he can calculate." She nodded. She picked up her coffee again. She was doing the math. Not his math, her own math. The math of how long she could keep Lucas out of his routine before the disruption started costing him something. He was resilient. He was also 8 and 8-year-olds needed their world to be a certain shape. "I need to know," she said, "at what point this ends." "Define ends. At what point do I stop moving between safe houses? At what point do I go back to my apartment and my job, and Lucas goes back to his regular school drop-off, and everything that happened last week is something that happened rather than something still happening?" Adrian was quiet. "That depends on DeLuca," he said. "That's not good enough," she said. "I understand you're managing something complicated on multiple levels. I understand that. But I have a brother, and I have a life, and I am not a piece on a board that you move around until the game resolves. I need an actual answer." He held her gaze. 2 weeks, he said. "Maybe less." 2 weeks, she repeated. "DeLuca's leverage depends on his ability to reach you. Once I've restructured the pressure on his operations enough that coming after you costs him more than it's worth, he'll redirect. He always redirects when the cost-benefit shifts. And you can do that in 2 weeks. I can do it faster if certain things go the way I'm arranging them to go." He paused. But 2 weeks is the honest outside estimate. She looked at him. Okay, she said. Okay. 2 weeks is 2 weeks. I can work with 2 weeks. She picked up her phone. I'm going to call Gary and tell him I need the time. I'll tell him it's a family medical situation. He'll be unhappy, and he'll hold the job because I'm reliable, and he knows it. Adrian watched her make the call. She could feel him watching, not intrusively, not in a way that was uncomfortable, but with the quality of attention he brought to most things, the kind that registered more than it let on. Gary was unhappy. Gary said something about scheduling and coverage and the Friday dinner rush. Sophia apologized. Gary held the job. She ended the call. He held the job, she said. I heard, Adrian said. Don't say anything, she said. I wasn't going to. She looked at him. You were going to say something about paying Gary to hold the job. He made a brief expression that was the closest thing to amused she had seen from him. I was going to say Gary sounds like he knows what he has in you, he said. She blinked. That was not what she had been expecting. She looked back at her coffee. He's a fair boss, she said. Better than most. The morning moved. Lucas came in from the yard with dirt on his knees and the news that there was definitely a colony of something under the back step that he needed a jar for. Elena found him a jar. He went back outside. The simple operational efficiency of an 8-year-old with a clear purpose was Sophia found a genuinely stabilizing thing to witness. She was helping Elena organize the kitchen because she needed to do something with her hands, and because sitting still while things happened around her was not something her nervous system could sustain when Vincent Caruso arrived. She had seen Vincent twice before, but had not spoken to him directly. He was a compact man in his early 50s with the kind of face that held its expressions very close, and gray eyes that she suspected missed nothing. He and Adrian went into the back room. She kept organizing the kitchen. 15 minutes later, Adrian came out. She looked at him. Tell me, she said. DeLuca reached out. She stopped moving. To you. To Vincent. Through a channel they've used before for communication, when things needed to be said without being said officially. What did he say? Adrian came fully into the kitchen. He looked at her for a moment in the assessing way he had, which she now understood was not coldness, but a very specific kind of care. He was deciding how much truth she could absorb at once, and then he was choosing to give her all of it anyway, because he had learned in the last 48 hours that she handled truth better than she handled gaps. He said, "Come alone, or the waitress disappears." The kitchen was very quiet. "Disappears," she said. "That's the word he used." She set down the pot she was holding. She set it down carefully, which was the thing she did when she needed her hands to do something controlled while her mind was doing something else. "He's using me as bait," she said. "Yes." He was always going to use me as bait. Adrian did not answer that directly. He did not need to. She could see in his face that this was something he had known was a possibility, had perhaps known was a probability, and had been managing against it while also knowing he could not guarantee the management would hold. "You knew," she said. "I knew it was a possibility," he said. "That DeLuca would try to use you as a point of leverage. And you brought me here anyway. The alternative was leaving you without protection. The alternative," she said slowly, "was what? Being a loose end. Which is worse than being leverage, I suppose. I get to exist as leverage." "Sophia?" "I'm not angry," she said. It was true, which surprised her slightly. She examined the feeling to make sure. "I'm not angry. I'm working through it." She turned away from the counter and looked at him directly. "He's using me to get to you, which means whatever he thinks you feel about me is significant enough to use." Adrian was very still. "What does that mean?" she said. "What does he think you feel?" "DeLuca looks for attachments," Adrian said carefully. "Points of emotional investment. He's very good at identifying them and applying pressure to them. And he identified me as one of yours. After the parking structure, yes. The decision to intervene personally to come myself, rather than sending people. That's the kind of thing DeLuca notices. It's not what I usually do." She looked at him. "Is he right?" she said. "Is he applying pressure to something that's actually there?" Adrian held her gaze. The question hung between them for a moment that was longer than comfortable and shorter than it felt. "He's applying pressure to my principles," Adrian said carefully. "I don't walk away from people I've decided to protect. DeLuca knows that. He's using it." "That's not actually an answer to what I asked," she said. He looked at her. "No," he agreed. "It's not." He did not supply a different answer. She picked up the pot again and set it on the correct shelf because the conversation had reached a place that neither of them was ready to stand in for very long. "What are you going to do about his message?" she said. "I'm not going alone to anything Marco DeLuca sets up." "What are you going to do instead?" "Find out where he's planning to be when he expects me to show up, and go there under different circumstances than he's planning for." "You mean you're going to go after him?" "I mean I'm going to make sure that what he's planning to do to you becomes structurally impossible. By going after him. By addressing the source of the problem, rather than managing its symptoms." She looked at him. "That's a very careful way to say going after him." "Yes," he said. "It is." She exhaled. She leaned against the counter. She looked at the ceiling for a moment, which was a habit she had developed at 16 when the world felt very large and she needed somewhere to rest her eyes that was not another person's face. "And while you're doing that," she said, "where am I?" "Here. Under Elena's supervision." "Under protection," he said, "not supervision." "There's a difference. Supervision implies monitoring your choices. Protection implies managing the threats." She looked at him. "You're very precise about words," she said. "You said precision matters," he said. "I believe you were right." She held his gaze. Something in the exchange landed differently than their conversations usually did. Not because anything was different in the words exactly, but because she had said something to him 2 days ago that he had held on to and was now giving back to her, and that small act of having listened, of retaining what mattered to her and turning it back to her when it fit, was more intimate than most things that had passed between them. She pushed off the counter. "Don't get yourself killed," she said. He looked at her. I know it's not a concern you were anticipating from me," she said. "I'm adding it to your list of things to factor in. Don't get killed." He was quiet for a moment. "I'll factor it in," he said. He left at noon with Vincent and 2 other men whose names she had not learned and probably wasn't going to. The townhouse without Adrian had a different quality, not emptier exactly, but differently weighted. Elena was there. 2 other men on rotating positions. Lucas in the yard with his jar, now maintaining what he was calling a field study. Sophia sat at the kitchen table, with her bills and her phone, and the arithmetic of her life, which she had been doing in parallel with everything else, because the arithmetic did not pause for context. Her phone rang at 2 in the afternoon, unknown number. She looked at it. She knew she should not answer. She answered. "Miss Bennett?" The voice was calm, older. The specific calmness of someone who was not calm by nature, but had practiced it until it became indistinguishable. "I hope you're comfortable. Safe houses have a way of making people feel managed rather than protected. I always find that an important distinction." She kept her voice level. "Who is this?" "Someone who thinks you deserve more information than you're being given." A pause. "My name is Marco DeLuca. I believe you've heard of me." She held the phone very still. "How did you get this number?" she said. "You've been using your personal phone throughout this situation," he said. "That was, if you'll forgive me, a small oversight." She looked toward the hallway. Elena was in the other room. "What do you want?" she said. "I want to have an honest conversation with you," DeLuca said, "which is something I suspect you haven't been having with Adrian." "I don't know what that means." "It means that Adrian Moretti makes decisions based on his own sense of obligation, and he doesn't always share the full picture with the people those decisions affect." A brief pause. "Do you know why he protected you?" From the very beginning? Because people don't get to hurt innocent. Because you were a variable he could control, DeLuca said smoothly. Because Carver's people at the restaurant were a situation that was already in motion, and Adrian protecting you publicly gave him a piece of leverage over me, the appearance of knowing something he didn't yet know. You were useful to him from the moment he read your file. Sophia said nothing. I'm not telling you this to frighten you, DeLuca continued. I'm telling you because you strike me as an intelligent woman who has spent a long time making her own decisions, and who would not appreciate being used as a game piece by any man, regardless of how principled he presents himself. She was very still. What do you want from me? She said. A conversation, in person. I think if we talked you would understand that your situation and mine have more in common than you might think. He paused. I have no interest in harming you, Miss Bennett. My interest in you ended the moment Carver became overzealous at the parking structure. That was not my instruction. And yet, she said carefully, I heard that Carver doesn't move without your instruction. A silence. You're well informed, he said. There was something in his voice, not quite surprise, not quite respect. I listen when people talk to me, she said. Then listen to this. Adrian's protection has a ceiling. And when he reaches it, you're going to need options he won't give you. I can be an option. She looked at the window. She thought about what Adrian had said the night before. DeLuca uses people. Not in the abstract sense. In the specific sense. She thought about the sentence this man had just given her. I can be an option, and how it was the kind of sentence that sounded like an offer and worked like a hook. I'll think about it, she said. Of course, he said pleasantly. Take your time. The call ended. She set down the phone. She sat for exactly 4 seconds. Then she stood up, walked to the hallway and said, Elena, Adrian needs to call me, right now. Elena looked at her face and did not ask a single question. She pulled out her phone. Adrian called back in under 3 minutes, which told her something about where he was and what he was doing, that she did not press on. He called you, Adrian said. Before she could say anything, the knowledge was already there. You knew he would, she said. I suspected. Your phone. We should have switched it out on the first night. It's... Adrian. She kept her voice even. He said something. What did he say? She went through the conversation, every word she could remember. She was precise, because precision mattered. She had learned that from him, and because she understood that how she relayed this would determine what he understood, and what he understood would determine what he did next. She got to the part about being a variable he could control. Adrian was quiet on the other end. He said you protected me because I was useful to you, she said. That the whole thing from the beginning was about having a piece of leverage over him. Silence. Adrian. I'm here. Is it true? The pause that followed was the longest he had given her. Not the pause of someone choosing words. The pause of someone deciding something. When I read your file, he said slowly, what I saw was a woman with no protection who had accidentally walked into a situation that was going to get her killed. That was the primary thing. The primary thing was that you were going to be hurt, and I could stop that. That's not a complete answer, she said. No, he said. It's not. Another pause. There is a thing that happens in the kind of work I do where the right thing to do and the strategically useful thing to do sometimes align. And when they align, you do them. Because doing the right thing that is also useful is not the same as doing the right thing only because it's useful. But I was useful. Yes, he said. You were. Your existence as someone under my protection gave DeLuca a signal about what I knew and what I was prepared to do about it. That signal was real, and I used it. She absorbed that. So he's right, she said. He's partially right, Adrian said. Which is the most dangerous kind of right because it uses the true part to make the untrue part feel true as well. What's the untrue part? That protection was ever going to have a ceiling, he said. That I was going to reach a point where you became inconvenient and I would stop. He paused. DeLuca does that with the people he protects. He calculates the utility, and when the utility ends, so does the protection. I know that's his experience of the world, but it's not how I work." She was quiet. "How do I know that?" she said. "You don't?" he said simply. "You know what I've done in the last 72 hours. That's all you know. And you have to decide whether that's enough to tell you something." She stood in the hallway with Elena watching her from the doorway, with the specific tact of someone who could tell the conversation was significant and was staying perfectly still so as not to disturb it. "I told him I'd think about it," she said. "His offer." Adrian's voice sharpened slightly. Not anger, something more compressed. "Don't." "I know," she said. "I was managing the conversation." "Don't manage DeLuca," he said. "He's been doing this for 30 years. He will read everything you give him." "I gave him nothing," she said. "I listened. I repeated back the thing I already knew to let him know I wasn't uninformed. And I ended the call." A pause. "You did well," he said, quietly. She did not say anything. "I'm going to have Elena switch your phone," he said. "In the meantime, don't answer anything from an unknown number. If DeLuca calls back, it goes to voicemail." "Understood," she said. "Sophia." "I know," she said. "I don't believe him." She ended the call. She was not entirely sure in the specific architecture of the truth that the last thing she had said to Adrian was completely accurate. She didn't believe DeLuca, but she had heard enough of what DeLuca had said to hold it up alongside what Adrian had told her and measure the fit. The fit was not perfect. That did not mean DeLuca was right. It meant the world was more complicated than simple, and she already knew that. She gave Elena the phone. At 4 p.m, Vincent called and spoke to Elena, who came to find Sophia with an expression she had not worn before. "There's a development," Elena said. "Tell me." Elena held her gaze. DeLuca's people have been at the Bellini's location again. This time they spoke to a co-worker, woman named Diane. They told her that Sophia Bennett was under federal investigation for financial fraud, and that anyone who assisted her or passed information to her would be considered a material witness. Sophia felt the specific cold of something that has no good resolution. "They're burning my job," she said. "Gary has apparently been on the phone with someone who presented themselves as a federal agent," Elena said. "We're working on establishing that the call was fraudulent, but it'll take time." "How much time?" "A day, maybe 2. And in the meantime, Gary thinks I'm under federal investigation." "Gary suspended your employment pending clarification." She sat down. She sat down because her legs made that decision before she did. 3 years. 3 years of every shift, every doubled-up table, every closed shift, when she wanted to be home every holiday, where she had told Lucas she would be a little late because the restaurant needed her. 3 years of being reliable, precise, never complaining, always coming in early and staying late when asked. DeLuca had taken it apart in one phone call. "He's escalating," she said, mostly to herself. "Yes," Elena said. "He can't touch us here, so he's destroying what's outside." She pressed her hands flat on her thighs. She breathed. "He's not coming after me directly. He's coming after my life. The pieces of it I can't move into a safe house." Adrian is aware. Is Adrian aware that my coworker Diane is probably scared right now, that Gary is probably sitting in his office thinking I've been lying to him for 3 years, that the one thing I've built in this city that has nothing to do with survival, just the simple dignity of showing up and doing good work, is currently being taken apart by a man I have never met who is angry that I was cleaning a table when his people had a private conversation? Elena was quiet. Sophia breathed. She breathed for a long time. "Sorry," she said. "I'm not that wasn't at you." "I know," Elena said. "I need to talk to Adrian. He's in the middle of—" "I know what he's in the middle of," Sophia said. "I still need to talk to him." He called at 5. "I know about Bellini's," he said before she could speak. "Then you know it's not just about keeping me safe anymore," she said. "He's disassembling my life, piece by piece. If I stay in this house and let you manage the situation by the time it's over, there won't be a situation to go back to. The job can be fixed. The Bellini's situation is, I don't want you to fix it, she said. I want it not to need fixing. Sophia, I've been thinking, she said, about what you need, what actually ends this. What I need is for you to stay where you need DeLuca to believe he has leverage, she said. That's what his message was about. Come alone. He needs you to believe I'm in danger severe enough that you'll walk into something he sets up. Yes. What if he's right, she said. The line was very quiet. What if he's right that I'm in danger, she said. Not because of anything you failed to prevent, but because I let him believe he has me. No, Adrian said. The word was flat and immediate. Listen. No, Sophia, whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking that a man who uses people as pressure points is currently using me as one, and the best way to remove a pressure point is to reposition it. She kept her voice even. If DeLuca thinks he has me, and he calls you to set up a meeting, and you go to that meeting, but not the meeting he's planning for, you are not going to be the bait in a trap set by Marco DeLuca, he said. His voice had a quality she had not heard from him before, not anger, something more fundamental. That is not happening. I didn't say I was going anywhere, she said. I said, I know what you said. I know exactly what you're suggesting, and the answer is no. She was quiet. You're not going to let me be part of this, she said. I'm going to keep you safe, he said. Which is what I told you I would do. And if keeping me safe means you walk into something alone because you think it's the only way to protect me? Silence. Because that's what he's banking on, she said. That your protection of me is the lever he needs. And if you go at this without accounting for that, I'm accounting for it. How? By not going alone. He specifically said, come alone. People who say come alone always mean come alone, so I can control the terms, Adrian said. Nobody who says come alone is prepared for a different arrangement. So what is your arrangement? He paused. I'm not telling you, he said. She felt a flash of frustration. Adrian, because, he said, and his voice changed slightly, became something that was not controlled in quite the same way it usually was, because the less you know about what I'm walking into, the less you'll be thinking about it. And I need you to be thinking about Lucas and keeping your head clear and not spending the next 12 hours deciding to do something I can't undo. She held the phone very tightly. That's not a reason, she said. That's a management decision. Yes, he said. It is. You said you weren't going to manage me. I'm not managing you, he said. I'm asking you to trust me, to let me do this one thing without I'm asking you to let me handle this part. She did not say anything. She was very aware of the distance between managing and asking. She was also very aware that he had made it a request rather than a directive, which was a distinction she had demanded from him from the beginning. How long, she said. Tonight. Tonight. It's going to move tonight, one way or another. She looked at the kitchen window. Outside, she could hear Lucas still doing his field study, his voice a steady narration about whatever he had found under the back step. If something goes wrong, she said. If you don't? She stopped. Elena has instructions, he said. If something goes wrong, you and Lucas are moved to a location that has nothing to do with me or anyone connected to me. You'll be out of this entirely. That's not what I was about to say. He waited. She exhaled. Be careful, she said. That's all. Just be careful. A pause. I will be, he said. She almost believed it was that simple. She did not believe it was that simple. She put down the phone and went to the back door and watched Lucas crouch over his jar with the focused reverence that children bring to small things, and she thought about the fact that she had spent 3 years protecting this particular small person, and in the process had built a kind of armor that was supposed to keep the world's complications out. DeLuca had found a seam in the armor. And the thing she had not told Adrian, the thing she had decided while she was telling herself she was just thinking, was that she was not going to wait in a townhouse while the seam got wider. She was not built for waiting. She had never been built for waiting. She went back inside, and she found Elena, and she said, "Tell me what you know about where DeLuca operates." Elena looked at her for a long time. "Sophia," she said carefully. "I'm not going anywhere," Sophia said. "I'm gathering information. That's different." "Is it, Elena?" She looked at her directly. "I spent 3 years keeping everything standing on the strength of knowing the full picture. Every bill, every due date, every risk, every option. I don't make decisions in the dark. I need to understand what tonight looks like." Elena studied her. "What I know," Elena said slowly, "is what Adrian has shared with the people working directly on this." "Then tell me that." Elena looked at the door. She looked at Sophia. She made a decision that was visible in the brief shift of her posture. The thing that happens when someone's professional judgment and their human judgment arrive at different answers and they have to choose between them. "DeLuca has a location on the west side," Elena said. "An import business, legitimate front. He uses it for private meetings when he wants controlled ground. And Adrian is going there. Not directly. He's working the edges first, getting to DeLuca's people in the right order to collapse the support structure before he engages the center. And Carver is the center," Elena said. "Carver goes where DeLuca tells him. He's at the import location." Sophia nodded slowly. She was doing something she was good at, which was taking disparate pieces of information and constructing the actual shape of things from them. The electricity bill and the rent and the school schedule had all required the same skill, not the skills she had wanted to develop, the culinary ones, the creative ones, but the ones that kept the lights on. She understood what tonight was going to look like. She understood something else too, that DeLuca's message had said, "Come alone, or the waitress disappears." And DeLuca was the kind of man who meant what he said as a mechanism, even when it turned out to be a bluff. And if Adrian was going after DeLuca's support structure first, the moment DeLuca realized his structure was being compressed, he was going to move on the waitress before the walls closed in. Not as leverage anymore. As consequence, she was on her feet before the thought was fully formed. "Where is Lucas?" she said. She was already moving toward the yard. Lucas was at the back step with his jar crouched down, deeply committed to whatever was happening under there. She checked the back gate, latched. She checked the side fence. She came back inside. She stood in the middle of the kitchen and thought very fast. DeLuca could not reach her here. The location was clean. Adrian had said so. Elena had said so. 2 men on perimeter. Gate latched. But DeLuca had called her personal phone this morning, which meant he was not limited to the channels she thought he was limited to, which meant clean locations had a shelf life she might have been overestimating. She looked at Elena. "Has Adrian checked in since 5 o'clock?" "It's 5:40, Elena said. "Has he checked in?" Elena looked at her phone. "Not since the call with you." Sophia felt the particular focus she had felt in the parking structure, that cold, bright narrowing. "He's already moving," she said, "which means DeLuca's people are already responding, which means..." Her phone buzzed, not her phone. The new phone Elena had given her, the clean number. She looked at the screen. Unknown number. She and Elena looked at each other. She answered, "Sophia." The voice was not DeLuca's, it was Carver's. She recognized it from the restaurant, from the things she had spent the last 4 days trying not to hear. "I think you should know that the man who's been protecting you has walked into a building on the west side that he did not properly account for. I think you should know that because I think you're a practical woman, and practical women like to know when the situation has changed." She kept her voice completely steady. "What do you want?" she said. "I want you to come and talk to Mr. DeLuca," Carver said. "Just talk. You have my word." "Your word," she said. "The word of a man who could have handled this very differently on multiple occasions and chose not to." She looked at Elena, who was already moving, already calling, already doing the thing that people in her position did when a call like this came through. "Give me an address," Sophia said. "Sophia," Elena said sharply. Sophia held up one hand. "The address," she said into the phone. Carver gave it. She ended the call. Elena said, "You are not going to that address." "I know," Sophia said. "Then why?" "Because Adrian needs to know where Carver is," she said. "And now we have it." Elena stopped. Sophia looked at her. "Call him," she said. "Give him the address. Tell him Carver just told me Adrian walked into something he didn't account for. And tell him I need to know if that's true." Elena was already dialing. Sophia stood in the kitchen of a townhouse that was not hers, in a city that had been trying to swallow her whole for the past 4 days, and she felt something she had not expected to feel. Not fear, not the bright, cold focus of a person managing a crisis. Something that was, if she was being precise about it, and precision mattered, she had learned that it mattered very much. Something that was close to fury. Not at DeLuca, not even at Carver. At the shape of the situation itself. At the fact that she had done nothing except be in a room at the wrong moment, and in exchange for that, nothing the life she had built, piece by careful piece over 3 years of used tea bags and late-night arithmetic, was currently being taken apart by a man who found her useful as a way to hurt someone else. She was done being useful. She was done being the pressure point. Elena's face changed. "What?" Sophia said. "I can't reach him," Elena said. The words landed. "How long has it been since anyone reached him?" Sophia said. Elena checked. 40 minutes. Sophia looked at her. 40 minutes was not a long time. In some situations, 40 minutes was a very long time indeed. "Get the car," Sophia said. "Sophia, get the car, Elena." She was already moving toward the back door, toward Lucas, toward the immediate logistics of the next 10 minutes. Because whatever Adrian walked into, Carver just handed us the address. And I am not sitting in this kitchen while someone who came to a parking garage at midnight to stand between me and 2 men decides to do the same thing on a bigger scale alone. Elena did not move immediately. She looked at Sophia with the expression of someone whose professional judgment had finally and completely surrendered to something else. "He's going to be angry," Elena said. "Good," Sophia said. "He can be angry at me while he's alive." Elena got the car. Elena drove fast and said nothing for the first 4 minutes, which Sophia appreciated because she needed those 4 minutes to think. Lucas was in the back seat with Gerald and his jar of insects, which he had refused to leave behind on the grounds that the colony needed monitoring. He had accepted the sudden departure with the same equanimity he brought to most disruptions, asking 2 questions, receiving partial answers, and then deciding that the partial answers were enough for now, and that Gerald probably needed to hear about the Spinosaurus anyway. Sophia was watching the city move past the window and doing the thing she was best at, which was constructing the actual shape of a situation from the pieces available. Carver had called her clean phone. The clean phone that only Adrian's people had the number for. Which meant either the number had been compromised from inside Adrian's network, which she did not want to think about yet, or Carver had resources she had not accounted for, which was its own category of problem. "Elena," she said. "I know," Elena said. "The new phone." "I know." Elena's jaw was set. "I'm thinking about it. If Carver has the number, then we don't use it to reach Adrian." Elena glanced in the rearview mirror. "Which means we drive to the address Carver gave you and we figure it out from there." "That's exactly what Carver wants." "I know that too," Elena said. "But you're the one who said get the car." Sophia looked at her. "I did say that," she acknowledged. So, she turned back to the window. "We don't go to the front. We don't go anywhere Carver is expecting someone to arrive." "And how do you propose we figure out where Carver is not expecting someone to arrive, given that we have never been to this location?" "Do you know it?" Elena was quiet for 3 seconds. "I've been to the import business once, 18 months ago, with Adrian for a meeting that was about something else entirely. Then you know the layout. Generally. Tell me generally. Elena told her. Ground floor reception and warehouse second floor offices side entrance used for deliveries back access from the service alley that was gated but not monitored because the camera had been broken for 6 months and apparently no one had considered fixing it a priority. Sophia listened. She thought about the kind of operations she had watched Adrian's people run over the past 4 days. The efficiency of it, the layering the way each decision accounted for the next one. She was not going to be able to replicate that. She did not have the training or the resources or the time. What she had was the broken camera on the back gate and the knowledge that Carver was expecting her to come through the front if she came at all. When we get close, she said, you drop me at the service alley. Then you take Lucas somewhere that is not near this location, and you stay there until I call you. Elena looked at her. That is not... Lucas cannot be near whatever is happening in that building, Sophia said. Her voice was completely level. And you cannot take him and also come with me. So you take him, and I go. Sophia, you are not... I'm not going inside, she said. I'm going to the back. I'm going to see if I can reach Adrian or Vincent through a channel that Carver hasn't compromised. And if I can, I tell them where Carver is, and they handle it. And if you can't reach them... She did not answer that immediately. Then I figure out something else, she said. But that's the first step. Clear steps one at a time. Elena drove. From the back seat, Lucas said, Gerald wants to know if we're going on an adventure. Sophia turned around and looked at her brother. He was holding Gerald up slightly, as though the Triceratops were asking the question rather than him, which was his method of asking things he was not sure he was allowed to ask directly. Tell Gerald it's a short errand, she said. Lucas looked at Gerald. She says it's a short errand. He looked back at Sophia. Gerald thinks that's the thing people say when it's actually an adventure. Gerald is very perceptive, Sophia said. But I need you to go with Elena when she drops me off, okay? I need you to do that without asking me a lot of questions. Lucas looked at her for a long moment. He was 8, not 4. He understood more than she usually gave him credit for, which she was aware of, and which she sometimes used and sometimes protected him from depending on what the situation required. Okay, he said. Promise me. I promise, he said. But if it turns out to be an adventure, I will tell you every detail, she said. I promise. He nodded, satisfied. He went back to explaining things to Gerald. She turned back to the window. She thought about Adrian saying, I'm not telling you on the phone, and the flash of frustration she had felt, and how she now understood the impulse completely, and still thought it had been the wrong call. Knowing was always better than not knowing, even when knowing was frightening, especially then. Elena stopped the car in the service alley with the engine running. 3 minutes, Sophia said. If I haven't signaled you in 15, you call Vincent's number directly and tell him everything. I have been trying Vincent's number for the last 20 minutes, Elena said tightly. Keep trying. Sophia put her hand on the door. And Elena, whatever happens, thank you, for all of it. Elena looked at her with an expression that was professional and human. At the same time, the two things sitting in her face in a way that most people kept more carefully separated. Come back out of there, she said. That's all I want. Sophia got out of the car. She heard the back door open and felt Lucas's arms around her from behind before she saw him coming fast hard, the hug of a child who has decided that the moment requires physical confirmation. She turned and held him for a second. Just a second. Short errand, he said into her shoulder. Short errand, she said. She let go. She walked toward the gate. The gate was not locked. This was the first thing she registered, the gate that was supposed to be the back access point. Supposedly gated was standing open by about 4 inches, which was either carelessness or something had moved through here recently and hadn't bothered to pull it fully closed. She pushed it open and went through. The back of the building was quiet in the specific way that buildings are quiet when activity is happening inside them. Not empty quiet, but contained quiet. The kind where sound is being managed rather than absent. She moved along the wall toward the service entrance. She tried Adrian's number. Nothing. She tried the number Vincent had called from that morning. It rang. It rang 3 times, and then someone picked up and did not speak. She waited. "Who is this?" said a voice that was not Vincent's. She ended the call. Her heart rate, which she had been managing, went up by a measure she could not fully control. Someone had Vincent's phone, who was not Vincent. She stood against the wall and thought very fast. Options. Go back to the gate, get to Elena, call the whole thing, except that she had given Carver an address and a timeline, and there was nothing she could do with that information now. Or go further in. Find another way to reach Adrian. Understand what he walked into something he didn't account for actually meant in concrete terms. She thought about the parking structure. She thought about him stepping out of the car and putting himself between her and 2 men without ceremony, without calculation, visible on his face, like it was simply the thing that came next. She went further in. The service entrance was unlocked. She had expected this less than the gate, and it made her slow down. An unlocked service entrance at a private business at 7 in the evening meant someone had propped it or someone had opened it recently and not resecured it. And either way, it was information. She went in. The inside of the building was exactly what Elena had described: warehouse space on the ground floor, pallets and shelving, a freight elevator against the far wall, a set of metal stairs leading up to the second-floor offices. The lighting was industrial, and most of it was off the remaining fixtures, creating pools of yellow that left the spaces between them dark. She heard voices upstairs, not loud. Not the voices of a situation that had resolved. The voices of a situation that was still being negotiated. She moved toward the stairs. She climbed them the way she had climbed the stairs in her building for 3 years. The way you learn to navigate the specific geography of a space when you need to be quiet. Which step creaks, and how to weight your foot to minimize it, where to put your hand. The skills of poverty were sometimes, it turned out, transferable. At the top of the stairs, she stopped. There was a hallway. Offices on either side, doors closed. At the far end, one door open, light coming through it. The voices were coming from that room. She recognized one of them immediately. She had been listening to it close and direct and through a phone for 4 days. And she knew the particular quality of it, the way it slowed down when it was being very careful, the way it took its time with words. Adrian was alive. She exhaled so quietly, it was almost not an exhale. She moved along the hallway wall toward the open door. She stopped 6 feet back where the angle of the door gave her a partial line of sight into the room without putting her in anyone's direct sight line. Adrian was standing. His hands were at his sides, not bound, which told her one thing. There were 2 men in the room with him. One she did not recognize. One she recognized as Carver from the quality of his voice when he spoke. "The issue," Carver was saying in the same calm voice she remembered from the restaurant, "is that you've been operating under an assumption that Mr. DeLuca considers outdated." "What assumption is that?" Adrian said. "That the lines you've maintained for the past several years are still lines Mr. DeLuca is interested in respecting. Marco knows what crossing those lines costs." "Marco knows what it used to cost," Carver said. "The calculation has changed." "Why?" A pause. "Because of you." Carver's voice was not emotional. It was the voice of someone presenting an analysis. "The last 72 hours. The way you moved. The decisions you made." "Specifically," Adrian said. "Specifically, you did not behave like someone managing a situation. You behaved like someone protecting something personal. And that changes the leverage structure significantly." She understood then what DeLuca had understood before she did. Adrian's behavior had told DeLuca something about the size of the lever available to him. And DeLuca had moved everything: Hargrove, the Bellinis, play the calls to her phone, Gary, all of it toward a single objective. Not disrupting Adrian's operations. Not winning a territorial dispute. Demonstrating that Adrian had a weakness in the specific and visible form of a 26-year-old waitress, and that DeLuca knew exactly where that weakness was. And Adrian had walked into this building. She did not yet know why. "Where is DeLuca?" Adrian said. "Mr. DeLuca sends his understanding," Carver said. "This is a preliminary conversation." "This is a room with 2 men and a door that was too easy to find," Adrian said. "This is Marco testing whether I'd come. And you came." "I came because someone I trust told me you had information about a threat to someone under my protection." A beat, which was probably also Marco. "It was," Carver said pleasantly. "You came faster than he expected." "So this is a demonstration," Adrian said. "Marco demonstrating that he can put me in a room." "That he can put you in a room," Carver confirmed. "And that you will come when the right name is attached to the invitation." Silence. She was 6 feet from the door, pressed against the wall, and she was making a decision that was forming not in her rational mind, but in something faster and less patient. She stepped into the doorway. 3 men looked at her. Carver's expression moved from controlled to recalculated in about 2 seconds. Adrian's expression did something she had never seen it do before. Something that bypassed every layer of management he had, and arrived directly at something raw. Something that was relief and fury, and a dozen other things, all occupying the same space at the same time. "Sophia," he said. "I know," she said. She looked at Carver. "I'm the name you attached to the invitation." Carver looked at her steadily. "You came yourself," he said. Not quite surprised. Something more like impressed against his will. "I had the address," she said. "And the back gate was open." "The gate was open because we expected you might try the back." "Then you expected right," she said. She walked into the room. She was aware in the very specific way that dangerous situations make you aware of your body of every step of the distance between herself and the men in the room of Adrian to her left, and the particular quality of stillness he had taken on. Not the stillness of someone who had accepted a situation, but the stillness of someone holding a great deal of force very carefully in check. She looked at Carver. "You told me on the phone that DeLuca wanted to talk," she said. "That this was about a conversation." "It is," Carver said. "Then let's have it," she said. "Whatever DeLuca wants to say to Adrian through you, say it. I'm here. Adrian's here. We're all in the room." Carver looked at her for a long moment. "You're not what I expected," he said. "People keep saying that," she said. He almost smiled. It did not reach anywhere important, but it was there. "Mr. DeLuca's position," Carver said, shifting back into the measured delivery of someone presenting terms, "is that the current situation has demonstrated something valuable. That Mr. Moretti has a particular vulnerability. Mr. DeLuca is not interested in exploiting that vulnerability. He is interested in it as a negotiating point." "He wants me to know he can reach her," Adrian said. "And he wants something in exchange for choosing not to. He wants the Hargrove situation returned to neutral," Carver said. "The audit findings filed in a way that reflects ambiguity rather than conclusion. You want me to destroy the case Hargrove spent 2 years building. We want the case to be filed in a way that allows for multiple interpretations. That's the same thing. That's a matter of framing." She watched Adrian's face during this. She watched the thing that was happening underneath the surface of it, the calculation, yes, but also something else. Something that was not calculation. He was thinking about Maria. She did not know how she knew that, but she knew it. He was thinking about the woman in his building, and about looking away because it was complicated, and about what that had cost him and the person it had cost most. She said no. Both men looked at her. "No," she said again directly to Carver. "Adrian is not doing that." "Sophia," Adrian said. "He's not," she said. She kept her eyes on Carver. "Because Hargrove is a real person who spent 2 years of his life building something real. And DeLuca is asking Adrian to destroy it as proof that he can be pressured. And if Adrian does that, if he bends on this because DeLuca has found a lever with the right amount of force, then the lever works, and DeLuca uses it again. And someone else ends up in a parking structure or a back room, or worse." Carver was watching her with the focused attention of a man who had spent decades reading people and was finding this one harder to categorize than usual. "You're protecting his principles," Carver said. On his behalf. I'm saying what's true, she said. He can say it himself. But since we're having a conversation, yes. That's what I'm saying. A pause. Miss Bennett, Carver said. With respect, you don't fully understand the scope of what's being discussed here. I understand leverage, she said. I've been managing leverage my whole life just with smaller numbers. Rent against electricity, against groceries, against what Lucas needs for school. Leverage is leverage. The math is the same. And the math here is that if you give in to the pressure point becomes permanent. The alternative, Carver said very carefully, is that the pressure point becomes a different kind of problem. She held his gaze. She understood the threat completely. She felt Adrian move. Not toward her. He didn't move toward her. He moved slightly to his left, which redistributed the weight in the room in a way she could feel even without seeing the exact geometry of it. It was a positioning move. She had watched him in enough rooms over the past 4 days to understand when he was arranging his options. Tell Marco, Adrian said, and his voice was very quiet, very even, that his read on the situation is correct. There is something I won't trade. And tell him that what that means is not that he has found a weakness. It means he has found the exact point where I stop negotiating. Carver was still. That's not going to move this forward, Carver said. No, Adrian agreed. It's not. A beat. So what does Carver said? I do, Sophia said. Both men looked at her again. She had not planned to say it. Or rather, she had not planned it the way she planned the electricity bill or the grocery budget. But she had been turning it over in her mind since the phone call this afternoon, since DeLuca's careful voice had given her the partially true version of events. And she had decided then that partially true was still partially true. DeLuca's argument this afternoon was that Adrian protected me because I was useful, she said. A variable he could control. Leverage. She looked at Adrian, then back at Carver. If that's what DeLuca believes, then I'm not leverage anymore. I'm someone who walked in here herself. I made my own decisions. Nobody moved me. That's, Carver began. That's the truth, she said. And the truth is that a leverage point that moves under its own power is not a leverage point. It's a person. And DeLuca knows. I think he knows that persons are considerably harder to use than variables. The room was very quiet. She had been listening to the sounds of the building throughout the low mechanical hum that was probably the freight elevator. The distant street noise that came through the walls. The settling sounds of a structure that had been standing for 40 years. She had been cataloging them the way you catalog the environment when you need to know its rhythm. She heard something now that was not part of that rhythm. Movement in the hallway. She kept her face still. Carver looked at the second man in the room, the one who had not spoken. Something passed between them. Then the second man's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. His expression changed. It changed in the way that expressions change when the information received is not the information expected, when the structure of a situation has shifted outside this room without anyone inside this room being told it was going to. He leaned toward Carver and said something very low. Carver's face did not change visibly, but something in his posture changed. The faintest reorganization. It appears, Carver said slowly, that Mr. DeLuca's evening has become complicated. Has it? Adrian said. There are people at the West Side property, Carver said. People who are not Mr. DeLuca's people. Whose people are they? Adrian said. Carver looked at him steadily. That's what Mr. DeLuca is currently determining. Sophia looked at Adrian. He was not looking at her. He was looking at Carver with the expression that was not quite anything, not triumph, not relief, just the stillness of a man watching the shape of a situation confirm what he had already built. She understood then. This room, Carver, this conversation, the bait and the invitation, this was the demonstration DeLuca had intended. Adrian walking in here was supposed to be proof of a weakness, proof of the lever's effectiveness. But Adrian had walked in here deliberately. He had walked in here knowing where Carver would be. because the address Carver had given her on the clean phone was the address Carver had wanted her to give Adrian. And Adrian had come, yes, but he had come as the visible piece of a larger arrangement, the thing Carver was watching, while the rest of the arrangement moved on the west side property where DeLuca was actually operating. She had been the bait. Not DeLuca's bait. Adrian's. She looked at him. He met her eyes. For a fraction of a second, something in his face said, "I know. I'll explain everything. I'm sorry, and I'm not sorry, and I know." She looked away. She thought about being a variable. She thought about being leverage. She thought about what she had said to Carver about persons being harder to use than variables, and she thought about the specific and complicated irony of having said it while being at that exact moment a person who had been used. But she held the thought fully. She held it and turned it over. He had not used her the way DeLuca used people. He had not put her in danger. He had been in this room with Carver as the visible piece while the real operation moved on DeLuca's actual location. She had arrived herself under her own power and had become part of it. And what she had said to Carver had been true. Every word. She had meant every word. Whatever Adrian had built around her arrival, she had not been performing when she said that she was not a leverage point, that she was a person, that she had moved here herself. That was still true. "Carver," Adrian said. His voice had shifted, not dramatically, just slightly the way the quality of light shifts when a cloud moves. "Tell Marco that the West Side situation is going to resolve in a specific way. Tell him the Hargrove files are intact and filed and beyond his reach as of 20 minutes ago. And tell him that the conversation I'm willing to have about the future of our arrangement is one that happens between him and me directly, not through you." Carver looked at him for a long moment. "And if Mr. DeLuca is not interested in a direct conversation," Carver said, "then the evening gets more complicated than it already is," Adrian said simply. "For him." Another pause. Carver looked at Sophia. It was a look she did not entirely understand. Not threatening, not calculating. Something more than either. "You should know," Carver said to her, "that Mr. DeLuca was telling the partial truth this afternoon." She waited. "The part about utility," Carver said. "The part about Moretti's protection having strategic value. That part is true, as I understand you already know." He held her gaze. But DeLuca drew the wrong conclusion from it. He assumed that because the protection was strategically useful, the protection was only strategically motivated. She was very still. "He's wrong about that," Carver said. "It was a simple statement, no edge to it. I've watched Moretti operate for a long time. He doesn't look at files the way he looked at your file." He moved toward the door. The second man moved with him. At the door, Carver paused. "The gate will stay open," he said. "Consider this location settled. Mr. DeLuca will receive my report." He left. The second man left. She heard them on the stairs. She heard the warehouse below, and then nothing. She and Adrian were alone in a room with bad lighting and the kind of quiet that only happens after a specific kind of tension breaks. She did not look at him immediately. She looked at the wall across from her and breathed. "You used me," she said, not as an accusation, as a statement of something she was still working out the shape of. "I set a situation in motion," he said carefully, "and you moved inside it yourself. You knew Carver would call the new phone. I suspected it was possible he could reach that number," he said. "Yes. And you knew I would give you the address." "I hoped," he said. "I didn't know." She looked at him. "There's a difference," he said quietly. "Between hoping and knowing," she said. "Between using someone and working with the truest version of who they are," he said. "You were never going to sit in that kitchen while something happened that you could affect. I did not plan for you to walk into this building. I expected you to give Elena the address and let her relay it. The plan changed." "Your plan changed," he said. "I can't control what you decide. I wouldn't want to." She held his gaze. Carver said you don't look at files the way you looked at mine, she said. He was still. What does that mean? She said. Not a challenge, a real question. He looked at her for a long time. This was the longest he had ever held silence with her in a room. Usually when he was quiet, it was the deliberate silence of a man choosing words. This was different. This was the silence of someone who had gotten to a place he had not planned to arrive at tonight and was finding that the language for it was not readily available. It means, he said slowly, that when Vincent gave me your file, the practical details, the electricity bill, the rent, the brother, the years of shifts, what I felt was not strategic assessment. She waited. What I felt, he said, was... He stopped. She watched him. He was not a man who struggled for words. She had watched him dismantle arguments, redirect conversations, state uncomfortable truths in complete sentences without hesitation. This specific struggling was not a performance. Recognized, he said finally. I felt recognized. She blinked. You had held everything together for 3 years, he said, by yourself, without anyone seeing the full weight of it, without anyone knowing the specific arithmetic you were running every day just to keep your brother in his school and the lights on. He held her gaze. I know what that arithmetic feels like. I know what it costs. She thought about this outside. His father's broken back. His mother's alterations at $2 a garment. The scholarship that was lost to a form nobody told them about. She thought about used tea bags and Gerald the Triceratop and the specific loneliness of being the person who holds everything and cannot afford to let anyone see how close to the edge you are. She had not expected to feel seen by Adrian Moretti. She had been prepared for used, for managed, for protected, in the way that a valuable asset is protected. She had not been prepared for this. That's not the same as what Carver said, she said. Her voice was quieter than usual. No, he agreed. It's not the same. It's... He exhaled. The exhale had something in it she had not heard from him before. It's more. The room was very still. Somewhere below them, the building made one of its settling sounds. The city continued outside. Everything else continued. She took one step toward him. Not dramatic. Not a scene from something. Just a step the way you step toward something real when you have been holding yourself at a careful distance for reasons that were right and are now not quite as right as they used to be. Your people on the west side, she said. DeLuca. Being addressed, he said. Vincent is unreachable because he's in the middle of it. It's going to work. It's working, he said. It was built carefully. And Hargrove. Safe, filed. Beyond reach. And Carver. Carver is... He paused. Carver is a more complicated calculation. He's not DeLuca. He's a professional who works for DeLuca. What happens to that relationship in the next 24 hours depends on what DeLuca decides. You think DeLuca might fold. I think DeLuca is a practical man who has just had a significant portion of an evening's operation go sideways, Adrian said. Practical men recalculate. She nodded slowly. She looked around the room, the bad lighting, the walls that had heard a conversation she had walked into without a plan and walked out of with something she had not expected to find. You should have told me, she said. I know, he said, not because I would have done something different, because... She looked at him. Because I was standing there telling Carver that persons are harder to use than variables. And I meant it, and it was true, and I deserved to know the full picture of what I was walking into. You're right, he said. No qualification. She looked at him. I'm right, she repeated. Yes. That's you're not going to explain why you made the decision you made. I made it because I needed the West Side operation to move without Carver having any reason to think it was moving, and the only way to keep Carver's attention in this room was to give him something real to focus on. He held her gaze. You were real. Everything you said in here was real. I could not have scripted it. I did not try. She thought about that. That's the most honest explanation you've given me since the parking structure, she said. Yes, he said. It is. She looked at him for a long time. She thought about what it meant to be seen clearly by someone. Not performed for, not managed, not protected in the sanitized sense. Actually seen. The arithmetic and the tea bags and the specific cost of holding everything alone. She thought about a man who had decided at 19 not to look away, who had built an empire partly out of that decision, who had come to a parking structure at midnight because the alternative violated something fundamental in the structure of who he had chosen to be. She thought about Carver saying he doesn't look at files the way he looked at yours. "Your people," she said. "The West Side. When will you know?" His phone buzzed. He looked at it. She watched his face. Something in it shifted not dramatically, but definitively, the way a held breath releases. "Now," he said. He looked up at her. "It's done." She felt the weight of the past 5 days lift by some measurable amount. Not completely, but enough to breathe differently. "DeLuca," she said. In a position where the conversation Adrian requested is the most practical option available to him. He put the phone away. "Which is where I needed him." She nodded. She breathed. She put her hand out, not thinking about it, not deciding to. Just her hand found his forearm, and she held on to it for a moment, the way you hold on to something solid after a long time standing on uncertain ground. He did not move. He let her hold on. She released it after a moment. "Lucas is in Elena's car," she said. "Somewhere. I'll get Elena's location. He has his insects." "Good," he said. And the word was so straightforward, so utterly without affectation, that she almost laughed. Almost. "Adrian," she said. He was already reaching for his phone. "What Carver said," she said. "About what you felt when you read the file." He looked at her. "Was he right?" she said. Is that actually what you felt?" He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. Simply, without the careful layering of most of his answers. Just the word. She held that. She thought about all the reasons she had constructed over the past 5 days, for why this was a complicated situation involving a complicated man, and why she needed to remain clear-eyed and practical, and not confuse gratitude with something else. She thought about those reasons. They were still valid. They were also, she was finding, not the whole picture. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. "You said it's more, and I said okay," she said. I'm not saying anything beyond that right now. I'm saying I heard you." He held her gaze. "That's enough," he said, quietly. She turned toward the door. "Let's go get my brother," she said. "He's going to have a lot of questions about this adventure." She heard him exhale behind her. A real exhale. The exhale of someone who had been holding a great deal together for a great many hours and could finally afford to put some of it down. She walked toward the stairs. He walked with her. Not ahead, not behind. Beside her. Which was, she thought, exactly the right place. Vincent called as they reached the ground floor. He was fine. He had been unreachable because his phone had been in the hands of one of DeLuca's people for approximately 40 minutes, which was now a resolved situation. He had 4 things to report, all of them developments, that meant the West Side operation had gone better than the outside estimate. Adrian listened. Sophia stood next to him in the dark warehouse and listened to the half of the conversation she could hear, and constructed the other half from Adrian's responses, which was becoming, she noticed, something she did automatically now. The specific skill of reading him from his side alone. DeLuca had agreed to a direct conversation. The meeting would be in 2 days on genuinely neutral ground, with terms that both sides could verify in advance. The Hargrove files were locked. Carver was apparently no longer in DeLuca's employ, effective as of approximately 30 minutes ago, a development that surprised her until she thought about the specific quality of that last look Carver had given her, and understood that some professional relationships end not with a betrayal, but with a man simply deciding that his own line had been crossed. Adrian ended the call. He looked at her. 2 days, he said. And then it's over, he said. The immediate version of it. The immediate version, she said. What does that mean? It means the pressure is off. It means you go home. It means Lucas goes back to his regular school drop-off, and you go back to Bellini's. I'm going to make sure Gary understands that the federal inquiry was fraudulent, and he will, and the job will be there. She absorbed that. Home. She had not thought about home as a destination in 5 days. She had thought about it as the thing she was protecting, the goal of the situation, the reason to get through each piece of it. Thinking about it as a place she could actually go back to felt strange, like hearing a word in a language you used to speak fluently and finding that it had a slightly different weight than you remembered. And the non-immediate version, she said. He looked at her steadily. That's a different conversation, he said, for a different time. When you're home, he said. When Lucas has his regular school drop-off. When the immediate version is done and you've had time to stand back from all of it and decide what you actually think. She looked at him. You're giving me room, she said. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for from the first night, he said. Your own decisions, your own pace. She thought about the parking structure, and you are not my possession, and the very specific distinctions he made about words and what they meant. All right, she said. All right, he said. They stood in the dark warehouse of an import business on the west side of Chicago, and outside the city was continuing in all its complicated, relentless life. And Lucas was somewhere in Elena's car with Gerald and his insects. And for the first time in 5 days, Sophia Bennett felt the specific texture of a situation that was still unresolved but was no longer emergency. Not safe exactly, not finished, but possible. She was a woman who had built her whole life out of possible. That was somewhere to start. Call Elena, she said. He was already dialing. Elena picked them up 2 blocks from the import building, Lucas in the back seat with Gerald held at a formal angle, and the insect jar wedged carefully between his knee and the door. And the first thing he said when Sophia got in was, "It was an adventure, wasn't it?" "It was an errand," Sophia said. "Gerald says it was an adventure." Gerald is a stuffed triceratops. Gerald has good instincts, Lucas said with the dignity of someone who has made his position clear and considers the matter settled. Adrian got in the front. Lucas looked at him with the focused assessment of an 8-year-old who has decided that a person is interesting enough to evaluate seriously. "You're the man who owns the window," Lucas said. Adrian turned slightly. "The window? At the other place, with the whole city?" "I suppose I am," Adrian said. Lucas considered this. "Gerald liked that window," he said. "Gerald doesn't like just any window." "I'll pass that along to the window," Adrian said. Lucas nodded, apparently satisfied. Sophia looked at the side of Adrian's face in the dark of the car. He was looking forward. But the corner of his mouth had done the thing it did, the almost thing, the movement that was not quite a smile, but lived right next door to one. She looked out her own window. The city moved past. She was going home. The apartment looked exactly as she had left it. This was the thing that surprised her, that 5 days of the most disorienting week of her life had produced no physical evidence in the space she came back to. The dishes were where she had left them. Lucas's dinosaur books were on their shelf. The bills folder on the kitchen counter was in the order that Carver's people had shifted them, not quite the order she had left them in, but close enough that she was the only person who would know the difference. She stood in the kitchen for a long moment. Lucas went immediately to his room. She heard the specific sequence of sounds that meant he was re-establishing Gerald's position on the nightstand and checking that the dinosaur books were undisturbed and finding everything where he expected it to be. Then she heard him come back out. "Everything's the same," he said like it was news. "Everything's the same," she confirmed. He looked at her. "Are you okay?" he said. She looked at her brother. His 2 big glasses and his serious eyes, and the way he had held on to her in the alley with the specific intensity of a child who does not yet have words for what he knows. "I'm okay," she said. "I'm really okay." He studied her face for a moment with the particular focus he brought to things he needed to be sure about. Okay, he said. He went back to his room. She stood in the kitchen alone. She thought about 5 days. She thought about what 5 days could contain: a parking structure, a safe house, a townhouse, an import building, a conversation in a bad-lit room that had moved things that she had spent years keeping very carefully in place. She put the kettle on. She did not use a used tea bag. She used a new one from the box she had bought on the way home when Elena stopped at the corner store, because it had occurred to her somewhere on the drive back that there were small dignities worth insisting on, and this was one of them. She drank her tea. She went to bed. She slept without arithmetic. The next morning Gary called. He called at 8:45, which was earlier than Gary usually called anyone, which told her that whatever he had to say was pressing enough that he had not waited until business hours to say it. "Sophia," he said, "I owe you an apology." She sat on the edge of her bed. "Gary, no, let me say it. Someone called this office presenting themselves as a federal agent, and I believed it. I suspended you based on a phone call. I should have verified, and I didn't verify it, and I'm sorry." She thought about who had made those calls to Gary. She thought about the specificity of the machinery DeLuca had deployed against her life. She thought about Adrian making sure Gary understood the call was fraudulent and what that conversation must have looked like. "Gary," she said, "it's okay. You couldn't have known." "I've known you for 3 years," he said. "That should have been enough. You should have your job back whenever you're ready, full schedule. And Sophia," he paused, "Diane is sorry too. She's been asking about you." "Tell Diane I'll see her Thursday," she said. Thursday was 2 days away. That seemed right. 2 days felt like the correct amount of space between what had happened and walking back into the ordinary world. She ended the call. She sat on the edge of her bed and thought about Gary's voice, the specific discomfort of a basically decent man who had done an indecent thing under false pretenses and needed to say so. She thought about the 3 years she had spent building the kind of reliability that made Gary willing to call at 8:45 to apologize rather than just restore her employment silently and move on. That had been hers. DeLuca had tried to take it and hadn't managed it in the end. She got up. She made breakfast for Lucas. She helped him find his left shoe, which had migrated inexplicably to the space behind the bathroom door. She walked him to school, which was 3 blocks, and took 11 minutes, and had a particular quality that morning. The cold November air, the familiar sidewalk, the other parents and kids doing the same thing they did every day that felt almost unbearably normal in the best possible way. Lucas hugged her at the school gate. "Tonight can you make the pasta?" he said. "The good one." "The good one," she confirmed. He went in. She stood at the gate for a moment after he disappeared through the doors. She stood there and breathed the cold air and felt the specific weight of ordinary life settle back around her, like something she had not known she was going to miss until it was briefly gone. Then she turned around. Adrian was leaning against a car across the street. She looked at him. He had not called ahead. He had not announced himself. He was just there in a coat that was not quite right for the temperature, too light, which was the first impractical thing she had noticed about him, holding 2 cups of coffee from the place on the corner that she had walked past 100 times without going in because it was $4 a cup. She crossed the street. She took the coffee he held out. She looked at him. "You could have called," she said. "I could have," he said. "But you came." "I had things to tell you," he said. "I thought in person was better." She wrapped her hands around the cup. "All right, tell me." "DeLuca and I met last night," he said. The direct conversation. She looked at him over the rim of the cup. "How did it go?" "DeLuca is a practical man," Adrian said. "The conversation was practical. The lines between our operations are redrawn. The Hargrove situation is DeLuca has stepped back from it, permanently or as permanently as these things go. And Hargrove himself. Hargrove will file his findings next month. The audit will conclude. DeLuca's financial structures will be examined. What happens after that is in the hands of people who are not me." She held that. You gave up control of the outcome, she said. I gave Hargrove back the ability to do his job, Adrian said. What he does with it is his. She looked at him. And Carver, she said. Carver is no longer in the city, Adrian said carefully. That was his own decision as far as I understand it. She thought about Carver's last look at her in that room, the thing in it she hadn't been able to categorize. He chose this, she said, stepping away. Some people have lines, Adrian said, and they cross them in service of what they're paid to do until the service costs more than the payment is worth. She looked at him. That sounds like something you understand personally, she said. It does, he agreed. She drank the coffee. It was good. $4 was it turned out a reasonable investment in a good cup of coffee on a cold November morning when the person next to you was saying things that deserved to be heard clearly. Adrian, she said. Yes. You said 2 days. When it was over, you said give it 2 days, and then we'd have the other conversation. He looked at her steadily. It's been 1 day, he said. It has, she said. I'm not starting the conversation. I'm establishing the timeline. The corner of his mouth moved. Noted, he said. She finished the coffee. She handed him the empty cup because there was nowhere else to put it, and he had pockets. He took it without comment. Tomorrow, she said. Come for dinner. He looked at her. Lucas is going to ask you questions about the window, she said. And Gerald's opinion of it. And probably about whether you know anything about late Cretaceous herbivores, which you don't, but he'll tell you, and you'll have to listen. I can listen? Adrian said. I know you can, she said. That's one of the things I've noticed about you. She turned to walk back up the street. Sophia, he said. She looked back. Thank you, he said, for what you said in that room. She held his gaze across the cold November sidewalk. I meant it, she said. Every word. She walked home. She called the culinary school that afternoon, not impulsively. She had been thinking about it for 3 days since the townhouse, since Lucas had said it's nice while it's now, with the devastating practicality of someone who had never been allowed to be sentimental about the future. She had turned it over and looked at it from several angles and decided that it was not impulsive. It was something she had been moving toward for years and had simply not had the specific clarity to name until 5 days of the most extreme version of her own life had stripped everything back to what actually mattered. She had wanted to be a chef. She had put that want in a box labeled Someday at 23 because someday was the label she put on things she could not afford to want actively, and she had been so focused on the present tense of survival that the box had gathered 3 years of dust. The school had an evening program, 4 evenings a week, 18 months. The tuition was significant. She sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and looked at the number for a long time. Then she did the math. The way she always did the math, systematically, honestly, without either optimism or despair distorting the numbers. The math did not work. Not quite. Not yet. She closed the laptop. She made Lucas's pasta, the good one, with the sauce she had learned from a cookbook she had found at a library sale 6 years ago and had been making from memory ever since. She made it carefully. She made it the way she always made it when she was thinking about something else, which was better than when she was thinking about the pasta, because thinking about something else made her hands work on instinct rather than deliberation, and her instincts about food had always been better than her deliberation. Lucas ate 2 full portions. This is the best one you've made, he said. You say that every time, she said. Every time it's true, he said. She looked at him. Lucas, she said. He looked up, his fork still in his hand. What would you think, she said carefully, if things started to be a little bit different? Not worse, just different. He chewed. He thought. He was 8, but he was a specific kind of 8 that had developed the habit of thinking before speaking, because he had learned early that the adults in his life responded better to considered opinions than reactive ones. Like how different, he said. Like maybe we have a little more of some things, she said. And things are a little more stable, for a while. He chewed some more. Would I still go to the same school? He said. Yes, she said. And Gerald would still be on the nightstand. Gerald stays wherever you put him. He nodded. Okay, he said. Different is okay, as long as the same things are the same. She looked at her brother. She thought about what it had cost her to keep the same things the same. She thought about what it would feel like if some of those things could be different, could be better. Not because someone had given them to her, but because she had found a way through. Yeah, she said. The same things are the same. He went back to his pasta. She sat across from him and thought about 4 evenings a week and 18 months, and a number that was not quite possible yet, and what yet usually meant when she was the one saying it. 10. Adrian came for dinner the next evening. He arrived precisely on time, which she had come to understand was one of his consistent qualities, not early, which would be presumptuous, not late, which would be disrespectful. Exactly the time he had said, which was itself a form of communication. He brought 2 things: a bottle of wine that she suspected cost significantly more than she was going to comment on, and a book about the Cretaceous period that was clearly new and clearly purchased that day, which he gave to Lucas with the same directness he brought to everything. Lucas looked at the book. He looked at Adrian. He looked back at the book. This has the fish chapter, he said. He said it with the gravity of someone confirming a fact that has significant implications. I was told the fish chapter was important, Adrian said. My teacher said it too, Lucas said. He looked at the book again. He looked at Sophia. Can I eat and read? Not at the table, she said. He took the book to his room with the focused reverence of someone who has received something exactly right without having asked for it and is not quite sure what to do with the feeling. She looked at Adrian. That was a good call, she said. I asked a bookseller what chapter 8-year-olds found most interesting, he said. She was very helpful. She shook her head slightly. She went back to the kitchen. He followed and stood in the specific way he stood in rooms where he was a guest, rather than an authority still present, not filling the space unnecessarily. She had noticed this about him. He adjusted to the room he was in. He did not require the room to adjust to him. Can you open the wine? She said. I can, he said. She handed him the corkscrew. He opened it the way he did most things competently and without ceremony. She cooked. He stood nearby and they talked in the way that people talk when the immediate pressure is off and the conversation can finally be about things that are not the immediate situation. He told her about growing up on the South Side in a way he had not told her before, not the outline she had pieced together from what he had given her, but the actual texture of it. His mother making alterations by the window because the light was better there. His father's voice on the good days when the back wasn't bad, which was a voice he still missed specifically. The sister who had eventually gotten a different scholarship to a different school and was now a doctor in Philadelphia, who called him every Sunday and pretended not to worry about him while clearly worrying. She knows, Sophia said. About what I do. He considered the question. She knows enough. She has decided that knowing enough is preferable to knowing everything. That sounds like a healthy arrangement. She's a doctor. She has a talent for determining what information is useful and what is... He paused. Unnecessarily distressing. Sophia smiled. She was stirring something on the stove, and she smiled at the stove, which was fine. She sounds like someone I'd like, she said. She would like you, Adrian said. It came out simply. Not as a compliment exactly. More like a statement of an obvious fact that he saw no reason to dress up. She looked at him over her shoulder. He was looking at her with the quality of attention she had catalogued over the past week. The attention that missed nothing, that registered more than it showed, that was somehow never intrusive, despite its completeness. She turned back to the stove. I called the culinary school, she said. He was quiet. The evening program, she said. 18 months. I've been thinking about it for a long time, actually. Long before any of this. And, he said, and the math doesn't quite work, she said. Yet. But I've done not quite working math for 3 years, and usually if you look at it long enough you find the angle. He said nothing. She appreciated the nothing. She had been braced for an offer, for money, for whatever fix he would reach for the way he reached for fixes. She had been braced to say no, and she had her reasons ready, and he did not make her use them. "What angle are you looking at?" he said. "There's a catering operation that does corporate events," she said. "High-end. They hire contract cooks for events on weekends. It's good money per event, inconsistent, but I can work Bellinis through the week and pick up contracts on weekends, and in about 4 or 5 months, I can build enough of a cushion to cover the first semester's tuition and childcare for Lucas during the evenings I'm in class." He was quiet for a moment. "That's a very precise plan," he said. "I'm a precise person," she said. "Yes," he said. "You are." She heard something in the way he said it that was not a simple observation. She filed it. "So in about 4 months," she said, "I start the program. 18 months after that, I have a qualification that means I can cook professionally. Actually professionally, not just for Bellinis. What do you want to do with it?" She turned from the stove. She looked at him directly. She had not said this out loud to anyone, not to Gary, not to Diane, not even to Lucas, because Lucas was 8 and the future was her job to carry. "I want to open a restaurant," she said. "Small, 20 seats maybe. Neighborhood place. Food that is actually good and actually affordable. The kind of place my mother used to take us before things changed." She paused. "I know how much it costs. I know it takes years. I know the failure rate." "And you're doing it anyway," he said. "I'm going to do it anyway," she said. "Yes." He looked at her. "I believe you," he said. She held his gaze. "I know you have money," she said. "And I know you would offer it without strings. I know that's who you are. I'm not rejecting it preemptively. I'm saying that this particular thing is mine to build. The way it gets built matters to me." "I know," he said. "You know," she said. "You told me 6 days ago that you don't take money from people you don't know," he said. "And that money means something different." She blinked. "You remembered that exactly." "I remember most of what you say exactly," he said. "It's a habit." She turned back to the stove. She was quiet for a moment, doing the small, precise work of finishing something that required attention. "Adrian," she said. "Yes." "The conversation you said we'd have when the immediate version was over." "Yes." "I'm ready to have it," she said. "If you are." He moved closer to the kitchen, the way you move when a conversation has become one that requires proximity rather than distance, not dramatically, just closer. "What do you want to know?" he said. "I want to know," she said carefully, "what this is. Between whatever is between us. I want to know what you think it is." He was quiet. "Because I have a brother," she said. "And a job and a culinary program I'm going to start in 4 months and a restaurant I'm going to open after that. And I have a life that I have built from very difficult materials. And I am not going to rearrange it around someone else. Not even—" She stopped. "Not even me," he said. "Not even you," she said. "So if what this is something that requires me to fit into your world in ways that—" "It's not," he said. She turned. He was closer than she expected, not uncomfortably so. Just closer than the kitchen usually allowed for. "I spent 17 years building things around myself," he said. "Operations, structures, arrangements. I'm very good at it. Everything in my professional life functions precisely because I have arranged it to function precisely." He held her gaze. "What I have not arranged, what I have not known how to arrange, because I have not had the occasion to, is anything that requires me to function as a person rather than an operation." She held very still. "You asked me in the car on the first night why I came myself," he said. "To the parking structure. I said something about not sending people when I should be present." "I remember," she said. "That was true," he said. "And it wasn't the whole truth." "Tell me the whole truth," she said. "The whole truth is that I read your file," he said, "and I understood for the first time in a long time what it felt like to be invested in a specific person's outcome. Not a principle, not an obligation, a person." He paused. "You specifically." She looked at him. "That scared me," he said, "because things I'm invested in become things people can use against me." DeLuca was right about that much. What he didn't understand is that I would rather have the thing that can be used against me than not have it. She absorbed that. "You would rather have me as a vulnerability than not have me at all," she said slowly. "I would rather have you," he said simply. "The vulnerability is just the cost of honesty." She looked at him for a long time. She thought about the 5 days, and the parking structure, and the safe house, and the townhouse, and Lucas saying it's nice while it's now, and Carver's last look, and the bad-lit room, and Adrian saying it's more with the specific difficulty of a man not accustomed to the vocabulary of more. She thought about her restaurant with its 20 seats and the culinary program 4 months away, and the arithmetic she had been doing her whole life, and what it would mean to let someone stand beside that instead of standing in front of it. "I'm not easy to be with," she said. "I'm not. I make my own decisions, and I don't apologize for them, and I told you that from the first night, and I meant it." "I know," he said. "And I'm not going to need saving," she said. "I was never going to need saving. I needed someone to not look away. That's different." "I know that too," he said. "It's different, and it's the version I'm offering." She held his gaze. "Not saving," she said. "Not saving," he confirmed. "Standing beside. At whatever distance you decide is right." She breathed. She thought about the first night in the parking structure when she had said, "You are not going to own or control me," and he had made the distinction between possession and chosen protection, and she had thought about that distinction for 5 days without finding a flaw in it. She thought about what Carver had said. "He doesn't look at files the way he looked at yours." She thought about Maria, about not looking away, about the decision that had shaped the rest of his life. She took one step toward him. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. "Okay," she said again. This is not everything decided right now. This is one step at a time." "One step," he said. "Starting with dinner," she said. "Which is ready. And Lucas needs to come out of his room and stop reading about the fish chapter long enough to eat." The corner of his mouth moved. "I'll get him," he said. She watched him walk out of the kitchen toward Lucas's room and heard him knock on the door and heard Lucas's voice saying something enthusiastic about Spinosaurus before Adrian had even finished knocking. And she stood at the stove with the food she had made and thought about 20 seats and a neighborhood restaurant, and one step at a time. It was enough. It was more than enough. 3 months later, Sophia Bennett enrolled in the evening culinary program at the Chicago Culinary Institute. She had made it work in 3 months rather than 4 because she had picked up the catering contracts faster than she expected. Turned out that someone who had spent 3 years managing a restaurant floor single-handedly during the chaos of a dinner rush was exactly the kind of person that high-end corporate caterers wanted at their events. And because Bellini's had given her a small raise, that Gary delivered with the specific embarrassment of a man who felt he owed her more than he was giving, but was giving what he could. She did not tell Gary about the culinary school. She did not want the conversation that would accompany it. She would show him when there was something to show. Lucas started staying with Elena on the 4 evenings a week that Sophia was in class. This had been Elena's suggestion delivered with the same no-drama efficiency she applied to everything, and Lucas had accepted it on the condition that Elena understood that Gerald needed to be on the nightstand and not the shelf. Elena had agreed. Lucas had arrived with Gerald and his insects and 4 dinosaur books, and the announcement that he was going to teach Elena everything important about the Cretaceous period. Elena, according to her own reports, was becoming genuinely informed. The culinary program was the hardest thing Sophia had done since the first year of managing everything alone. It was also the first thing in years that was purely hers. Not survival, not maintenance. Something she was building for herself, for the future version of herself that she had put in a box at 23 and was now carefully, methodically unpacking. She was the oldest student in her cohort by 4 years. She was the only one who had a full-time job and a child to care for. She was the one who showed up every evening with the particular focus of someone who does not have the luxury of coasting, which meant she was also within 6 weeks, the one the instructors paid the most attention to. She did not find this surprising. She had always worked harder when the cost of not working hard was real. Adrian was in her life in the specific way he had said he would be, at whatever distance she decided was right, which she adjusted as she learned what she needed. He was not at Bellini's. He did not come to the restaurant because that space was hers, and she was clear about that. He did not arrange things without asking. He did not offer money which she respected him for, in a way she had not expected to respect someone for restraint. He called most evenings, which had started as a practical check-in during the immediate situation, and had evolved into something they neither of them had named, but both of them maintained. She talked about the culinary program. He talked about his operations in the stripped-down version he gave her, enough to be honest, not enough to burden her with what she did not need to carry. She pushed back when he was wrong, which was not often, but was often enough that the pattern had been established. He listened when she pushed back, which was the thing she had decided early was the thing she could not compromise on. She met his sister. Her name was Claudia, and she flew in from Philadelphia on a Sunday in January for a visit she had been apparently planning for some time without mentioning to Adrian until 2 days before, which was her method of preempting his attempts to manage the occasion. She was 41 and efficient, and had her brother's quality of attention without the layer of management over it, which made her simultaneously easier and harder to be around. Easier because she meant everything directly, harder because there was no filtering. She spent 4 hours with Sophia and asked 37 questions which Sophia counted, because counting them was the way she stopped herself from being overwhelmed by the intensity of being evaluated by someone who loved Adrian Moretti. The way sisters love complicated brothers, fiercely honestly, without any of the mythology that surrounded him in the rest of his world. At the end of the 4 hours, Claudia said, "You're not afraid of him." "No," Sophia said. "Most people are afraid of him." "I know," Sophia said. "That doesn't seem like a very useful quality in a person he's close to." Claudia looked at her. "No," she said. "It doesn't." She picked up her coffee cup. "He told me about Maria." Sophia went still. "He's never told anyone about Maria," Claudia said. "Not in 20 years. I knew because I was there because I was 16 and I lived in that building too. But he has never spoken about it to another person as far as I know." She did not say anything. "He told me he told you," Claudia said. "The first or second night, when he explained why he does what he does." Sophia looked at her coffee. "He needed you to understand him," Claudia said. "Not the version everyone else knows, the actual version." She set down her cup. "In 20 years, he has not needed anyone to understand the actual version. He's been very comfortable with the mythology." She looked up. "I'm not the mythology type," she said. "No," Claudia said. "I can see that." She looked at Sophia for a long moment. "He's better," she said finally, quietly. Not a compliment exactly. A clinical observation from someone who had been watching her brother for 40 years and knew the difference between his versions. I don't have a better word. He's better." Sophia thought about the man who had stood in a parking structure and said, "She is under my protection now," and then driven through the city in silence, and made almost a sound like a laugh when she talked about Ribolita. She thought about him in Lucas's kitchen doorway, asking what the fish chapter was. She thought about its more said with the difficulty of a man not built for the vocabulary of more. "Yeah," she said. "I think so too." 12 months after enrollment, Sophia Bennett completed the first year of the program with the highest marks in her cohort. She celebrated by making dinner for 5 people in her apartment: Lucas, Elena, Adrian, Claudia, who had flown in again because she wanted to and did not need a more specific reason, and Gary, who had finally been told about the culinary school and who had sat across the table from her in his office with an expression that moved through several stages and arrived at something that looked like pride and embarrassment in equal measure. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said. "Because I wanted to do it first," she said, "then tell you." He had been quiet. "You're going to leave Bellini's," he said. "Eventually," she said. "Yes." He nodded. He looked at his desk. He looked back up. "When you open the place," he said, "I want to come opening night." She had looked at him. "Opening night?" she said. "First reservation." The dinner was loud in the way that 5 people in an apartment designed for 2.5 are loud, and the food was exactly as good as she intended it to be, which was very good. And Lucas explained to Claudia at significant length why the Spinosaurus was the most misunderstood predator in the Cretaceous period. And Claudia, who was a physician and had a scientist's quality of attention, engaged with this entirely seriously, which meant Lucas was deeply satisfied with the evening. Elena ate 2 portions of everything and said this was her professional opinion. Gary said the pasta was the best he'd ever eaten, and then looked at Sophia with the expression of a man understanding in real time what he had been missing. Adrian sat across from Sophia during dinner and said less than almost anyone else, and noticed more than almost anyone else. And once when Lucas was explaining something particularly technical about fish-eating dinosaurs, and the table was loud with the specific noise of people being genuinely happy. In a small space, he caught her eye across the table. She looked at him. He looked at her. He did the thing. The almost thing, the corner of the mouth movement, that had been the first crack in the wall of him, the first thing she had catalogued and filed. She looked back at her plate. She was smiling. She did not try to stop. 6 months later, Sophia Bennett signed a lease on a commercial kitchen space on the north side of Chicago. 18 months of evening classes, weekend catering contracts, Bellini's closing shifts, Lucas and Gerald and Elena, and the particular arithmetic of a life being built rather than just maintained. 22 seats. She had planned for 20. She had gotten 22 because the space was slightly wider than expected, and she wanted to do it right. She painted the walls herself over 2 weekends. Lucas helped and got paint on Gerald, which was a diplomatic incident, resolved by Sophia's assurance that the paint was washable, and Gerald's dignity remained intact. Adrian came the second weekend and painted the section near the ceiling that she could not reach, which he did without being asked, and without making anything of it, which was the version of him she had come to know best present without requiring acknowledgement. She named the restaurant after her mother. Not her mother, as she was now, not the disappeared version, not the one who had made the decisions that had handed Sophia her life at 23. The mother from before. The one who had taken 2 children to a neighborhood restaurant on her good days and ordered things from a menu without calculating, without anxiety, just the simple pleasure of food made well by someone who cared about it. The restaurant was called Claire's. She told Adrian the name the evening she decided it. He was quiet for a moment. "Tell me about her," he said. The before version. She had told him for the first time all of it, the full version. Not the outline she gave people when the subject came up unavoidably, but the actual texture of it. Her mother's hands, which were similar to her own. Her mother's voice when she was reading, which was different from her voice when she spoke normally, better, somehow more patient. The way she could make an ordinary dinner feel like a choice rather than a necessity, which was a skill Sophia had absorbed without knowing she was absorbing it, and had spent 3 years applying in ways her mother would not have recognized. Adrian had listened. The way he listened to everything completely without the performance of listening, just the real thing. When she finished, he said, "She gave you the thing you're building." She had thought about that. "Yeah," she said. "She did." He had let that sit. He had not tried to resolve anything about her mother, or the situation, or the complicated weight of loving someone who had stopped being available to be loved in the way you needed. He had just held the information and let her feel the full size of it without trying to reduce it to something manageable. That was the thing she had come to understand. That was the specific thing she had not known she needed. Not someone to fix the weight. Someone to know it was there. Claire's opened on a Thursday in November. 2 years, 1 month, and 11 days after Sophia Bennett had been wiping down the last table at Bellini's and heard 2 men having a conversation she should not have heard. Gary had the first reservation. He came with his wife, who turned out to be warmer and funnier than Gary, which Gary seemed to be aware of. He ate everything placed in front of him with the focused appreciation of a man who spent most of his professional life thinking about food and rarely got to simply enjoy it. He left a tip that was, in Sophia's experience, about 4 times what the bill warranted. She recognized the gesture. She did not say so. Elena came the second week with Claudia, who was in Chicago for a conference. They ordered everything on the menu, which Sophia did not require of anyone but appreciated. Claudia declared the fish course specifically to be exactly right, which Lucas would have approved of, and Elena said the dessert was going to be a problem for her professionally. Lucas came on a Saturday for an early dinner with Gerald, who was permitted at the table on the grounds that this was a family establishment and Gerald was family. He ate the pasta. He ate the fish. He ate a small portion of the dessert. He looked around the restaurant, the 22 seats, 3/4 full on a Saturday afternoon, the sound of people eating and talking in the specific key of people who are genuinely comfortable, the smell of food made carefully, and he looked at his sister. "This is good," he said. "Thank you," she said. "Gerald thinks so too," he said. "Tell Gerald thank you," she said. He picked up Gerald. He appeared to relay the message. He set Gerald back down. "Mom would have liked it," he said, quietly, without looking up from his plate. She held very still. "Yeah," she said after a moment. "She would have." He ate his dessert. She sat across from him and thought about Claire's before and Claire's after, and what it meant to take the things a person gave you without meaning to and build something real from them. She thought that the most important inheritances are not the things people intend to leave you. They are the things they cannot help giving you. Adrian came on a Sunday evening in December, 6 weeks after opening, not for a reservation, not announced. He came the way he had come to Bellini's all those months ago himself, without ceremony, at a time that worked for him. He sat at the table by the window. She brought him water. "You didn't make a reservation," she said. "I didn't know if I needed one," he said. "On a Sunday evening, you probably didn't need one," she said. "But the correct answer is, yes, reservations are required." "I'll make one next time," he said. "You will," she said. She brought him the menu. He looked at it for a moment. "What's your best thing?" he said. She looked at him. She had spent 18 months in an evening culinary program. She had spent 6 weeks running a restaurant she had built from arithmetic and stubbornness, and the specific inheritance of a woman who had made ordinary dinners feel like choices. She had spent 2 years learning the full vocabulary of more. "The ribollita," she said. "I make it fresh daily." He looked at her. "I'll have that," he said. She went back to the kitchen. She made it the way she had learned, and then the way she had learned beyond what she had learned, and then the way that was entirely hers, the version that had evolved through 6 weeks of making it every day in a kitchen that was finally actually hers. She brought it to him. He ate. He was quiet while he ate, which was his way with food, the same complete attention he brought to most things. When he finished, he looked up at her. "Better than Bellini's," he said. "I would hope so," she said. She sat down across from him. The restaurant was quiet, 2 other tables, a couple finishing dessert, a man eating alone with a book. The particular Sunday evening quality gentle and unhurried. "Do you regret it?" he said. "Any of it? The week, the way things started?" She held his gaze. She thought about the parking structure and the kettle and the bad-lit room and Carver's face, and it's more in one step at a time, and 22 seats, and Gerald's professional opinion, and Lucas saying, "This is good." She thought about what it had cost. She thought about what it had given her. No, she said. Not any of it. He held her gaze. Even the parts that were difficult, she said. Even the parts where I was scared and angry and didn't have enough information and had to figure out in real time what I actually believed about people and what I was willing to risk. She looked at him. Those parts made the other parts possible. You can't skip the difficult parts and arrive at the real thing. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. You can't. She looked at the restaurant. Her restaurant. 22 seats and the smell of food and the sound of people eating in the key of people who are comfortable. Ask me the thing you were going to ask me, she said. He looked at her. What makes you think I was going to ask you something, he said. You came on a Sunday evening without a reservation, she said. You ate slowly. You asked about regret. She held his gaze. You've been working up to something. I know what that looks like on you now. He was quiet for a moment. Something in his face did the thing that faces do when the management has been set aside completely, and what is underneath it is just the actual person unguarded, unperformed, present in the specific way that costs something. I would like, he said carefully, to be someone who is in your life, not the immediate version, not a situation being managed, the ongoing version. She held very still. I would like to be the person you call when something goes wrong, he said, and when something goes right. I would like to come to this restaurant on Sunday evenings with a reservation and eat the ribollita and sit across from you and hear what happened that week. He held her gaze. I would like to watch you build the next thing after this one, and the one after that. I would like to be present for all of it. She breathed. That's a lot of wanting, she said. Yes, he said. It is. For someone who spent 17 years not wanting things, she said. That's what makes it significant, he said. I don't want things I can't account for the weight of. She looked at him across the table in her restaurant on a Sunday evening in December, with the city outside carrying on in its enormous, complicated life. She thought about the woman who had stood at a parking structure in November with nothing, no connections, no protection. $17 in her checking account, a brother and his dinosaurs, and the specific arithmetic of survival, and had said, I am not your possession to the most dangerous man in Chicago as the price of accepting his help. She thought about who that woman had been and who she was now. Same woman. Different ground under her feet. Make the reservation, she said. Sunday evenings, standing reservation. He looked at her. And between Sundays, she said, you call when you say you're going to call, and you tell me the truth when I ask for it, and you let me build what I'm building in the way I'm building it. Always, he said, without hesitation. She held his gaze. And Adrian, she said. Yes. When Lucas finally explains the entire fish chapter to you, she said, you listen. The whole thing, all of it. Something happened in his face that was not the almost thing, not the corner of the mouth movement. It was the full thing, the real thing, unguarded and complete. He smiled. I'll make time, he said. She looked at him. She looked at her restaurant. She thought about Claire's and 22 seats, and the culinary program, and the catering contracts, and the electricity bill that was never late anymore, and Gerald on the nightstand, and Lucas's presentation about the fish chapter, and a man who had stood between her and two men in a parking structure, because looking away was something he had decided once and permanently not to do. She thought about what she had built. She thought about what she was still building. Sophia Bennett had not become powerful because a man chose her. She had become powerful because she had never stopped choosing herself, not in the parking structure, not in the safe house, not in the bad-lit room, not in the culinary school on Tuesday evenings when she was running on 4 hours of sleep and determination. She had always been the person doing the building. She had simply finally found someone who understood the difference between watching someone build and standing beside them while they did it. And Adrian Moretti, the man the city feared, the man who had built an empire from the decision not to look away, the man who had said, it's more with the difficulty of someone learning a new language late in life and committing to it anyway, had found in a restaurant called Claire's on a Sunday evening in December that the greatest thing he had ever protected was not a person. It was the belief that some things are worth standing beside. Not because they need you, because they are worth being present for. That was the whole truth of it. That was all of it, and it was enough, and it was real, and it was theirs.